and the yen 107.06. And watching Carnival this morning down 4.5% about this after it reported a second quarter net loss of $2.4 billion. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, it is being described as a devastating portrayal of President Trump's conduct of foreign policy. It's a new book by his former national security advisor, John Bolton, which says President Trump is in over his head dealing with complex issues on the world stage. The Trump campaign calls the allegations absurd, and the White House is suing to stop the book's release. The Trump campaign will move forward with its rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend. 20,000 people are expected to attend. Another 80,000 are expected to make up the spillover crowd. Health officials are urging attendees to wear masks and take other precautions. And the officer who shot Rayshard Brooks in a fast food parking lot in Atlanta has been charged with murder. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
All right, Amy, thanks. It's 6:49 on Wall Street. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. Time now to check what's going on in the nation's capital. Some of the top stories in our nation's capital include what you're just talking about there, Amy. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton's new book saying that President Trump asked China to help him win re-election. The Trump campaign moving ahead with Saturday's rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, despite those warnings for the local health officials, and the president signing a bill that punishes Chinese officials for imprisoning more than 1 million Muslims. Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments, watching all these developments. He joins us now. I've really been looking forward to this, Greg, this morning. I suppose I have my beach reading set for this summer, right?
You sure do, John. Good morning. You know, it's been a strange reaction in Washington. Nobody likes Bolton. The Democrats are saying, you know, why didn't you come out with this during the impeachment trial? The Republicans are saying he's a traitor, he's a liar. So he hasn't made a lot of new friends. I think more importantly, John, there's nothing really surprising in the book. I mean, we sort of knew about Trump and these things, and frankly, I don't think it's going to affect any votes in the fall. I think if you love Trump, you're still going to love him. If you hate Trump, you're still going to hate him. I don't think the book makes a big difference.
If everybody hates you in Washington, does that give you increased, I don't know, does that mean you're more credible?
Well, there's something to be said about that. If everybody in Washington is against you, that's a good point. But, you know, I've read all the summaries. There's a lot of juicy stuff in there, obviously. But I just think that now the fight will be over, you know, litigation over whether the book can come out. Of course it's going to come out. It's been leaked to the Washington Post and others. There might be an attempt to deny Bolton some royalties.
The book about Trump paints a picture of a president consumed with staying in office at just about any cost. As you say, it's probably not going to make a difference for people who love Trump, for people who hate Trump. Not going to change their opinions in any way at this point. But is it unusual for someone this high up to be writing a tell-all book about their boss?
Yeah, good point. It's probably the highest up that we've seen, and there's another book coming out in the fall by Bob Woodward, and I'm sure that'll be pretty harsh as well. You know, you say Trump is consumed with getting reelected, and I thought that until yesterday. There's quite a story that appeared overnight in the New York Times. Maggie Haberman is one of the co-authors, saying that Trump is increasingly frustrated. The job is starting to become a real drag for him. It's not as much fun as he thought during the heady days when he got elected. It's a story worth looking at. I think it indicates a president who is not as enthusiastic about the job as he used to be.
As far as President Trump's dealings with China, does that raise any red flags for you, whether or not the trade deals with China are tainted by all this?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot still that we don't know, and I think there's a lot we don't know that occurred yesterday between Mike Pompeo, who met in Honolulu with his Chinese counterpart, talking about trade. I don't think there'll be a breakthrough. I think both parties want to punish China, and now we have another trade fight with Western Europe, with tax negotiations breaking down last night. I think that we're going to have more tariffs and taxes between the U.S. and Europe. So if you like European wine like me, it's time to stock up.
Or maybe stick with California there, Greg.
There you go.
Hey, is there a point in this cycle where investors make their decision as to which candidate they want and make the decision as to whether this or that candidate is going to be good or bad for their investments?
Yeah, really good question. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think, even though the betting lines are now showing Biden as the favorite, it's way too early. We're still in mid-June. I won't take the polls super seriously until after Labor Day, and I think the markets would agree with that. But for all the talk that Biden is a moderate, that he's predictable, there are Biden policies the markets are going to have to grapple with, including much higher taxes and a much more aggressive, much less aggressive regulatory policy, much more aggressive, I should say. So there are a lot of Biden policies that I think the markets will be concerned about.
Greg, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Greg Vallier, the Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments, with us this morning. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. It is 6:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, providing industry partners with commercially focused research and innovation services through its New Jersey Innovation Institute. Learn more at njii.com. Now here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Nintendo stock is surged to levels not seen since 2008. Shares, which have been driven by fears of a second wave of coronavirus, are also being boosted by news of new Pokemon games for both Switch and mobile. Pokemon developers also said they will share news on a further big project next Wednesday. Zoom will offer a full end-to-end encryption to all users, free and paid, succumbing to pressure for the video conferencing company to bolster privacy. Zoom says those using its service at no charge will have to verify their phone numbers to get access to the strongest level of security. The company had previously said it would reserve this feature only for large corporate clients who paid for the service. And NASA's next Mars rover is honoring medical workers on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic. With just another month until liftoff, the space agency revealed a commemorative plate attached to the rover named Perseverance. The black and white aluminum plate shows planet Earth atop a staff entwined with a serpent, a symbol of the medical community. The path of the spacecraft also is depicted with its origin from Cape Canaveral. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. John.
All right, thanks, Karen. 6:55 on Wall Street. And now time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report, where we're looking at the coronavirus pandemic's impact on businesses across the country. And now that New York City is reopening, small businesses like Melanie Frost's Essabagel preparing for a return to some degree of normalcy. When we first talked to Melanie back in April, she had shifted to a delivery model, but business was still down about 80%. And now, Melanie, I understand the delivery business picked up quite a bit. And now that some folks are going back to the office, you're catering something like office reopening parties. Tell us about that.
We're doing it for a real estate company where we're going to actually be providing breakfast for the entire building and welcoming back their employees to work. So that's something else we've been looking into, of other companies that we can help out, inviting employees back to the city.
Now, has business picked up to what you would call some sort of normal level?
Yes and no. In certain areas, it's picked up more. I think people are getting more deliveries, certainly. But the in-store retail, not as much. I think also it's summer, people are out of the city. So I think that business has changed. It's going to be different, and it's really going to be more of a takeout and delivery. I think fast casual definitely is going to dominate the market because people are just interested in, getting something, getting it quick, and getting the food that they want quickly.
Melanie Frost of Essabagel here in Manhattan, trying to adapt and survive as New York City moves into the next phase of reopening. Melanie, thanks a lot. Good to talk to you again. And we're going to continue to bring you stories of small businesses trying to survive and reemerge from the pandemic every day at this time right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Small Business Report for today, Karen. I'll save you a bagel.
Oh, thanks. I could use one. All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are down about 4 points. Dow futures down 29. And they've been jumping around a bit this morning. NASDAQ futures, they're higher. They're up 7. The DAX in Germany is down about 0.5% right now. 10-year Treasury up 9/32, yield 0.70%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.1%, up 42 cents at $38.38 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down about 0.1%. down $2.40 at $17.33 an ounce. The euro this morning, 1.1253 against the dollar, and the British pound is at 1.2491. The yen, 107.03. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. For John Tucker, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
.com on the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
As businesses, as consumers, we have to make our decisions knowing that there is this deadly disease swirling around out there.
These kinds of aggressive policies do lead to misallocations of capital.
I think it's important for the credibility of policymakers to follow through on the commitments they've made.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City, with one eye on Washington, D.C., for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with equity futures slightly negative. We're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Farrow, together with Lisa Abramowitz. We start the program this morning by heading over to London with a Bank of England rate decision on deck. Guy Johnson, more QE from the BOE.
Yeah, but it's pretty much in line with what the market was expecting the bank to deliver, John. The Bank of England raising its total bond purchase target to $745 billion. That's an increase of 100. There was some speculation that that number could go higher. Remember, we'll wait until 2:30 before the governor's comments to journalists are published. We'll get more details on exactly what the bank is thinking at that point. But there is obviously speculation swirling that we could see an expansion of the operations of the Bank of England, possibly as far as negative rates. The Bank of England voted, John, 8-1 to expand QE by $100 billion. Be interesting to know what the one is. Be interesting to know whether that one is actually for more QE at that point. The data at the moment out of the UK, very, very weak at the moment. We saw the CPI data earlier on this week, incredibly weak, and that negative 20 GDP print for April. Evidence suggests that the Q2 drop is less severe than originally thought. That is interesting as well. Remember, the bank and the government more broadly seen as being more optimistic on the economy than the wider economics community here in the UK. But the bank, John, is ready to take further action as needed to aid the economy. That's what we've got so far.
Looking at cable right now, the pound filling the gap lower going into the decision, Guy. Cable turning around negative by just 0.1% now on the pound against the US dollar at 125.48. Guy, get me to August for the next big Bank of England sit down.
Yep.
We expand QE by $100 billion. Do they have to go again?
The expectation is they probably do have to go again, John. In many ways, today is just a continuation operation. It basically, by adding that amount of money, it gets them where they need to be in August to be able to make a better assessment of what is happening with the economy. The bank now saying the asset purchase program to be completed by around the turn of the year. Recent data suggests the UK recovery started in May. So basically we bottomed out then. But that August decision seen as being absolutely pivotal. There's been a great deal of speculation of late as to whether or not the Bank of England will dip its toe into the negative rates universe. However, that trade has come off over the last few days. it's now widely thought that the bank will look at other options such as yield curve control, maybe lowering the rate on the term funding program, which is basically similar to what the ECB is doing with the TLTRO. You keep the main rate where it is, and you lower the funding on that program, which gives the banks very cheap money, or it could buy even riskier debt. But the bank also adding now, John, that the labour market has weakened materially. Certainly the latest employment data would suggest that. But that August meeting now absolutely crucial. We wait until 2:30, I think. We may get a better guide at that point, John, as to where the bank is going, where the governor is going, in terms of additional policy, which could become reality in August.
Guy Johnson on the latest from the Bank of England, the call from Fred Needle Street for another 100 billion sterling in QE. Tom Keane, largely expected, maybe they'll have to do even more. Largely expected they expand the balance sheet again, looking for more QE of 100 billion, and sterling turns around with it.
Yeah, it's amazing, John. It's like as expected as what Man City did to Arsenal last night. John, what I want to know from you, I'm going to interview now our Chief Premier League strategist, Jonathan Farrow. John, do you decide to do negative rates, or does the market tell you to do negative rates? What do you think?
Well, I think what the Bank of England has done over the last couple of months has been really curious. I think they're flirting with negative interest rates, which brings down yields even further. But, Tom, I don't actually think they want to do it, and we need some clarity on that. You know, Mervyn King, the former governor, used to call this the Maradona strategy, where you feint left, you feint right, but ultimately you just keep going straight forward. And I just wonder whether they want to encourage markets to think they are prepared to do even more without actually doing it.
Yeah, John, who's Maradona?
Oh, Tom, come on. You can't know the Man City Arsenal score and not know who Diego Maradona is. Come on, you're just exposing yourself.
I'm sorry. Was he there last night? I don't know. I know Kenny G played.
Oh, Kenny G played? You mean David Luiz? Can I turn to Lisa Abramovich to get the latest on what we can expect in the next 24 hours? Lisa, I don't know why I turned to Tom off the back of this decision in the first place. Lisa, walk me through the day ahead, please.
Well, it's interesting, especially as the data gets worse in terms of the labor market in the United Kingdom. It's getting better in the United States, and we're expecting at 8:30 a.m. the initial jobless claims as well as the continuing claims, which I'm watching very closely to see whether the optimistic read on the May jobs report will bleed through to this month. Also, what I'm watching, 1 p.m., Democrats in the House unveil an infrastructure proposal, and then at 3 p.m., President Trump is meeting with governors to discuss a reopening of small businesses. Very interested to hear what he has to say, if anything, about the book that John Bolton wrote. Also, a look ahead to his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma tomorrow. Election season really heating up in the United States, adding yet another headwind, crosswind, whatever you want to call it, to a very difficult market right now.
And nobody's happy with Mr. Bolton. We'll catch up with Kevin Cerruti a little bit later this hour. He'll join us from Washington in about 10 minutes' time. I want to start the program with Kate Moore, BlackRock's chief equity strategist. Another central bank, Kate, doing a whole lot more and maybe still more to come. Can you tell me whether traditional valuation approaches matter anymore in a world dominated by monetary policy?
Well, let me just say good morning, and then also let you know that I think valuations at this point are really tricky, especially forward measures of valuations. You know, no one at this point, analysts, companies, strategists, portfolio managers, has a great sense for what earnings will be in 2020 or in 2021. I've had people start talking about, medium-term trend earnings, and that may be fair, but I think we're experiencing a lot of dislocations in the economy and in consumption patterns, and it's pretty difficult to predict. So valuations, in and of themselves are a difficult way to make investment decisions. What I will say is, on a cross-asset basis, with all of this QE, with all of this policy support, with all this repression of yields, equities may look a little bit better.
Kate, this is extraordinary. I agree with you. It's completely unusual times. But June 30 beckons. How will institutional buy-side money reset for July 1?
I'm not sure we're going to have a giant rebalance after the second quarter. I mean, we always get excited about pension rebalances and flows and index rebalances when those times come, and they never tend to move the market as much as we might fear. I think there's been a consistent rebalancing of institutional portfolios along the way, and, people still are trying to figure out what to do with the second half of the year, let alone make big asset allocation shifts that will affect, multi-year horizons. So at this point, I would expect people to continue to ride the risk wave a little bit, conscious of the fact that in the second half of the year, we do have another big set of big risk factors. Lisa just mentioned the election. I think that's something we're going to have to focus very closely on. There's going to be a lot more news out of D.C. over the next couple months, and a lot of posturing by both the Democrats and the Republicans, and I think that's perhaps going to shake the market a little bit at some point.
Kate, I've been struggling with riding the risk curve at a time when people really are still hiding out in some of the more defensive names. You're seeing this certainly with the tech stocks, and you're seeing this in investment-grade credit. At what point will investors get conviction? What do they have to see to go further into risk?
Well, Lisa, I feel like you're sort of asking at what point do we get a rotation into value, into perhaps some of the lower quality stuff. The hiding out has really been in higher quality companies with good balance sheets, strong business models, with management teams that investors have conviction in and confidence in their ability to execute. And I think that makes sense. I mean, the trouble with what falls into value or what falls into the highly cyclical parts of the market at this point is that some of it is structurally impaired. It's a much harder call whether we're talking about, the next couple of weeks or the next couple of years. I think you have to be more selective. One of the ways that we've been talking about it is on my team is to go into the wimpy cyclicals. These are cyclical companies, if you want to make a rotation towards better global growth and better U.S. growth, that also have the balance sheets and decent management teams. They may not be the cheapest in the cyclical bucket, but I think that they're the better bet.
Kay Moore, always great to catch you with you. Kay Moore joining us from BlackRock on some of the cyclicals out there. Lisa, talking about structurally impaired businesses right now, did you hear the Delta CEO on surveillance an hour ago, speaking to Bloomberg's David Westin, capping capacity on planes at 60%? Now, he was clear, that cap can change, but let's really consider that. Operating below capacity across a series of industries, can these airlines make money at 60% capacity?
It's really difficult. And this is a big question, which is how much can these airlines ramp up business at a time when people are nervous about contracting the virus and they have to protect themselves from a liability standpoint? But John, I'm just struggling with the viability. At what point does the pressure on some of these companies not getting customers through the door, at what point does that start to create a solvency issue that Fed money cannot solve? And I think that is really what a lot of investors are grappling with.
Well, it's not just limited customer demand, Tom Keene, it's limited ability to actually expand capacity. You have to put the cap on yourself at an airline. And I think one thing we need to consider, Tom, a whole lot more, and I know we've touched on it several times over the last couple of months, but below capacity economic growth. That's something we're going to be grappling with for a long time, away from that sequential improvement story that's driving this market.
John, I think you nailed the meat of the Delta interview. I think it's just absolutely incredible how we're going back to a maxim, which John Farrow, you and I talked about, I think, the other day, which is it a variable cost or a fixed cost? These companies, whatever their industry, they're being overwhelmed now by the new reality of crushing fixed costs, and they're going to have to adjust to that. To be honest, Mr. Bastian alluded to that he needs to wait and see what September and October bring.
Looking down to Washington, D.C. next on this program, guys, Mr. Bolton managing to upset absolutely everybody. The Republicans for obvious reasons, the Democrats because he didn't testify, and the book reviewers, they're not happy either. We'll talk about that next with Kevin Cirilli down in Washington, D.C. from New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Bramage. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. It is being described as a devastating portrayal of President Trump's conduct of foreign policy. A new book by his former national security advisor, John Bolton, claims the president asked Chinese leader Xi Jinping to help him win re-election by buying more U.S. farm products. Bolton tells ABC News that Russia's Vladimir Putin believes he can play President Trump, quote, like a fiddle.
When you're dealing with somebody like Putin, who has made his life understanding Russia's strategic position in the world, against Donald Trump, who doesn't enjoy reading about these issues or learning about them, it's a very difficult position for America to be in.
President Trump tells Fox News that by writing and publishing the book, Bolton committed a crime.
But he broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified. That's the highest stage. It's highly classified information.
The Trump campaign calls the allegations in the book absurd, and the White House is suing to stop the book's release. The top public health official in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there's been a spike in coronavirus cases, is recommending the Trump campaign delay their rally planned for this weekend, but the campaign says the rally's going on as scheduled. So Health Department Executive Director Bruce Dart is urging precautions for attendees. The rally is expected to bring in 20,000 people with an overflow crowd of 80,000 more, including thousands of people in the streets. And Democratic rival Joe Biden calling on President Trump to, quote, wake up, accusing him of waving a white flag and retreating from the fight against the coronavirus. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
This is a very complicated relationship. It's gotten more complicated because of actions that they have taken recently. I think we have what is an excellent agreement. We have in place $370 billion worth of tariffs, in addition to all the things that I said so far. I think it's a really good agreement for the United States. We expect it to be honored.
U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer on the China-United States trade deal. John Bolton casting a shadow over that trade deal this morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Bramett. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. In your equity market this morning, we roll over just a little bit. We fade on equity futures. We're down, call it 14 points on the S&P 500, off by around about 0.4%. In the bond market, set up as follows on treasuries. We come in around about 2 basis points on a 10-year to 0.72% in 1 hour and 12 minutes. Claims data in the United States very much in focus. In focus in Washington, in the room where it happened, or as Tom Keene likes to call it, the Bolton Papers. The Democrats unhappy that John Bolton did not testify. That is more fuel for the White House, who claim that this is just a disgruntled former employee, Tom. And the reviewer over the New York Times, not happy either, writing the following: the book is bloated with self-importance, even though what it mostly recounts, is Bolton not being able to accomplish very much. It toggles between two discordant registers, exceedingly tedious, and Tom slightly unhinged.
Yeah, nice summary there, John. I think you really captured the moment, particularly for a global audience. This is going to be huge in America today. What we want to do is give you some clarity of thought. And what this mostly comes down to is a uniquely American concept of free speech. This started in 1798, was really infirmed in the Depression years, particularly in the Midwest of Minnesota and Nebraska, and culminated in the Pentagon Papers of 49 years ago. Joining us, Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, inside the Beltway, free speech is a huge deal. What do you expect to see in the next 48 hours from Judge Lambreth, and what it will mean for the Bolton Papers and what it will mean for the president?
Well, three things. First and foremost, regardless of what the judge decides, the information in the book already ricocheting its way through the 2020 presidential election. This is John Bolton, the president's former national security advisor, accusing President Trump of trying to make a deal with President Xi Jinping in order to get reelected. Now, I spoke with Tim Murtaugh, who is the communications director for the president's reelection campaign, and he calls it, quote unquote, absurd. Now, the administration, for their part, pushing back heavily, saying nothing to see here, it's false, and trying to move on. The second point that I would raise is that, again, this was largely expected. The administration knew that this book was coming out, and they tried to go the route of the judicial system, essentially to water it down. They're saying it's a breach of contract. When you work in the intelligence community, when you work on these sensitive national security issues, you do sign non-disclosure agreements, and not in the sense of a Trump organization non-disclosure agreement, but with the United States government. So, finally, lastly, regardless of what the judge does rule, this is a playbook that in recent years, even predating the Trump administration, has really been utilized by the publishing industry to drum up some sales for books. And that's what you're seeing really on full display here.
Well, we're all talking about it this morning, and I imagine every single network in the United States is doing exactly the same thing as we talk about it, Kevin. Kevin, is anyone in Washington, D.C. happy about this book?
I think Biden's campaign is. I mean, I think if you're former Vice President Joe Biden, this is just another piece of information that you can use to try to attack the administration on. But beyond that, yesterday Biden was campaigning in suburban Philadelphia, Delaware County, and meeting with small business owners. But I spoke with several top Democratic strategists who are wondering when Joe Biden is going to make more of an aggressive campaign pitch. When is he going to be able to really drive some news media narratives? It's a stark contrast, Jonathan, from what you're seeing from President Trump. He is going to be back on the campaign trail on Saturday in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with a massive Make America Great Again rally. He's going to be flanked not just by top surrogates from his campaign, but by Republican lawmakers. And it's setting them up, they argue, for there to be a contrast of they want to reopen the economy, they want to get things back to normal, in their words, And the president yesterday appearing on Fox News saying that they think that the virus is going to fade away versus a more what Biden world would say is a pragmatic approach, but a slower approach nonetheless.
Kevin, the market actually moved lower when the headlines about the book by John Bolton came out yesterday. This sort of expectation that perhaps it dampens President Trump's chances of getting reelected. Does it? I mean, is there any momentum among Republicans or anyone else within the base against President Trump based on these allegations?
Lisa, I mean, I put that very question to a Trump advisor within the last 24 hours, and what the advisor said was impeachment, Mueller, you name it, what has happened. In terms of from a practical standpoint, in terms of between now and Election Day, virtually no chance of there being another impeachment process between now and Election Day, a significant one that would be a threat for a removal of office, and virtually no chance of there being any type of Mueller report that would come of Bolton's book at all.
Right. Kevin, nobody's surprised by this. Very quickly here, why did the president select Dr. Bolton? Everybody knew this was coming who knows John Bolton. Why did he pick him for the job originally?
I'll keep it tight. It's part of a coalition of national security leaders. John Bolton is someone with a long history with Washington, D.C., very influential in conservative intelligence circles, and was brought into the administration as a result of that.
Kevin Cirilli down in Washington, D.C. Kevin, thank you. Headline crossing a Bloomberg comes from the Wall Street Journal. The president denying endorsing President Xi's camps for Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, China. And Tom, I think that is probably what's more interesting about this particular book. It's how it complicates policy in the weeks and months to come of this presidency, and maybe for a second term for the president of the United States as well. How does it shape the president's approach with China over trade? And what you saw yesterday, I thought was fascinating, Tom. What did the president do yesterday? He signed the bill protecting Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, China.
Yeah, there it is. But John, to your point, and I think the Lighthizer tape we played earlier was very appropriate. Is this the end of any discussions before the election with China? I mean, maybe that's the outcome of the salacious comments within this book.
And Lisa, as we know, this was going to be one of the big focal points of this election campaign. Who was hard on China? Who could get the concessions? And I think for that reason, some of the paragraphs that come from this book are quite damaging to that campaign.
And there's a question about, exactly to your point, John and Tom, this idea that perhaps President Trump will take an even harder line with China to prove a point ahead of the election, which certainly would be a risk, at least if you look at some of the models out there that are bullish on equities.
Much more still to come. Equities right now slightly negative. We are down 16 points on the S&P 500, down around about 0.5%. In about an hour from now, claims data in America. U.S. jobless claims just around the corner. Will it validate some of the optimism we got from the payrolls report a couple of Fridays ago and from U.S. retail sales earlier this week? From New York City this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
This is a message from the government. Some businesses are now able to welcome back their employees and customers. To keep everyone safe, it's important you follow government guidance and make your workplace COVID secure. Businesses should carry out COVID-19 risk assessments, put in place hygiene procedures, and help staff and customers keep a safe distance. Talk to your employees, listen to their concerns, and if possible, help them to work from home. Every workplace is different, but by following this guidance, you can get back to business safely and play your part in managing the risk of infection. Visit gov.uk/working safely for more information. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro, together, of course, with Lisa Abramowitz, counting you down to the opening bell with equity futures slightly lower, down around about 13 points on the S&P 500, negative 0.4%. In the FX market, take a look at cable all over the place. The pound against the US dollar, 125 and negative 0.4% at the moment. They expand QE by 100 billion. And Tom Keene, Andy Haldane has to be the most confusing monetary policy official anywhere on the planet, because I struggle to get a read on him every time he speaks. He's the single dissenter, the sole dissenter on the MPC, pushing it back against that vote to expand QE over at the Bank of England.
Dead on. His inconsistency of a very bright Dr. Haldane is something. John, which way did he dissent? We don't even know, do we?
We find out now, no QE. He wanted to keep it unchanged, Tom, going into the August meeting. He wanted to keep QE unchanged, where it was, leave it there, and meet again in August.
We will see, but John nails that about the always interesting Haldane. His papers are treasured. Also treasured is our Max Neeson. We get a quick COVID update. Max, there's all the charts. There's all the different states. The Sun Belt's getting hammered. I get it. Let's focus on Tulsa, where, as Kevin Cerulli says, the president is going to have a huge event here in a couple days. The growth of the COVID virus in Tulsa, Oklahoma, how does that differ from the growth of the virus in Queens, New York, outside New York City, say 6, 7, and 8 weeks ago?
So those sort of comparisons are a little tricky because
Nowhere is more dense than New York City. But what you do have in Tulsa and Oklahoma is, a level of community spread that was never entirely brought under control, and now case growth and growth in the positivity rate. For every given test, you have more people turning up positive, which indicates that there's just spread you're not catching. And if you combine that with a large indoor rally in a population of people where wearing masks has not been modeled as good behavior by the president, and may not be fully enforced. And it's a huge indoor event, something that our evolving understanding of how the virus spreads says is the worst possible thing you can do. You do have a significant amount of risk.
Max, what would you say to the elderly people of Florida? Your knowledge on this is so holistic. How would you advise that 25% of Florida that's on the edge of ancient?
I think the best advice is to be as careful as possible in the weeks going forward. The data out of Florida, and it's not just confined to a couple of specific outbreaks or counties, there seems to be spread in a number of parts of the state, is that when there's community spread, everything becomes riskier. So to the extent that people can stay home, now is a good time to do so again.
Max Neeson, thank you so much from Bloomberg News. John Farrell, give us an update in the United Kingdom. I look at the Telegraph, I look at the Guardian, I look at the Financial Times and their domestic coverage. And John, I'm baffled by the policy of the Johnson government. Is there one?
Tom, you're not alone. But the policymaker and the tolerance of the policymaker is the focus of this market right now. And right now, the Prime Minister is pushing ahead with reopening. And you see similarities to what is playing out in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis saying pretty much the same thing, Tom. We're pushing forward. We're going to carry on reopening. And it's the difference, the distinction between the way governors in places like Florida, Texas, the Prime Minister of the UK is handling things compared to Beijing. Beijing sees an outbreak, an increase in infections. They start shutting flights again and they close schools. It's a very different response, Tom. And what I find fascinating about this market is there is trust that China can deal with it and deal with it in a way that won't hurt growth in a big way. And there is trust, completely the opposite kind of trust in the United States, that even with an outbreak, even as we continue to reopen, it won't damage consumer confidence and it won't hit the data. That's a lot of trust.
You'll see that data at 8:30 this morning, the widely anticipated weekly claims, the 4-week moving average, and the continuing claims as well. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Bramowitz, and Tom King, we are thrilled you're participating in our simulcast. We've been really humbled, I can say humbled, by the response we've get. It's wonderful that Lisa gets all the love notes, John receives no mail, and I get all the hate mail. It works out perfectly every time. Someone that we adore is with us now. Ian Lingen is with us, BMO Capital Markets. For years, he's written a brilliant and concise research note on the fixed income market and how it links in to our economy. Ian, what are you writing this morning?
Good morning, Tom, and thanks for the kind words. It's really nice to be here. This morning, what we're focused on is the fact that, as the point was made earlier, there's a great deal of optimism priced into the market at this point. But what we see playing out in the equity market, which is this persistent grind higher to more questionable valuations, in the Treasury space, we're really just trading a range, and a range that's going to be with us for a very long time. Rates will be low both in the front end, given what the Fed has told us about policy rates, and even further out the curve. Think about it, 10-year yields are at just 71 to 75 basis points, given everything that's going on. I expect that will become a semi-permanent feature in the Treasury market, at least for the next few months.
Have bonds lost their signaling power for riskier assets?
I would say that they have taken on a much more muted response in when we see fluctuations in risk assets. Part of that is because the Fed is so actively involved in the Treasury market via QE. again, $80 billion a month in Treasury buying is going to have an impact. The flip side of that is that that the Treasury Department will be issuing a great deal of debt. So there's the underlying problem is the Fed needs to avoid being perceived as directly monetizing the deficit, even if, in fact, that is directly monetizing the deficit.
Ian, I'm struggling to understand this battle between fundamentals, which appear pretty weak, and then you have the Fed's policy, which is a bazooka and a kitchen sink, as well as a tank. And I'm wondering at what point fundamentals will start to matter again. At what point will the viral counts in places like Texas and Arizona start to matter?
So at this stage, we knew that there was going to be a second wave. The health experts told us that at the beginning of the pandemic. Whether we made significant or incremental strides at flattening the curve remains to be seen. The biggest risk, and I think that what the market took away from the first lockdown, was that it's the lockdown that's going to hurt the market more so than the pandemic itself. So a shifting away from the actual COVID-19 stats and more to the governor's responses, I think, is frankly warranted, given the fact that the most significant risk for financial markets at the moment is that the pandemic gets so bad that states close businesses again. And I think that as we watch the numbers play out, there's also an underlying question about, can we really trust the economic data, given some of the data collection issues that are...
Ian, there is an alternative outcome, of course, that could damage risk appetite that we should probably discuss. It's not just the tolerance of policymakers, but also whether the increase of infections in some of these states, some of these hotspots, constrains the consumer, hits consumer confidence and business confidence as well. Do you expect that it could, that it will?
It could, it will, and to some extent it already has, right? Because if we think about what some of the retail sales figures look like at the height of the pandemic, of course people were going to be spending less. I'm less actually concerned about people's propensity to consume and more concerned about their ability. So we have such a significant amount of job losses. When are these people reintegrated into the economy? And if they're not, and some of these special programs run out, what happens to consumption at that point?
Ian Lingham of BMO Capital Markets, the head of US rate strategy. Always great to catch up with you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Lisa, this for me is the equation. The equation has shifted over the last couple of months. We talked about it, I think, yesterday as well. Several months ago, if you saw an outbreak of infections, it was the fear that the economy shut down that rattled this market. And ultimately, that's the story that materialized. This time it's a different kind of equation. It's the equation as follows. Will the policymaker have the tolerance to keep reopening, to push forward? So far, governors in some of these states keep pushing forward. And then the ultimate outcome, for me at least anyway, from a market's perspective, which is rather crude, of course, is whether it constrains confidence. You can reopen, will people turn up? And Lisa, that's a question you've asked many times over the last several weeks.
I'm struggling to understand how you even measure that, though. It's very difficult to get a gauge of that when it's not as clear-cut as a full shutdown. And I think that we're looking at that and all the tea leaves, consumer sentiment, traffic, all of the sort of high-frequency data that's taking on increasing importance. I do want to just set the record straight, John and Tom. Tom, I do perhaps get love letters if what you talk about with love letters has to do with yield curves and bond spreads, because that is basically the gist of the love that I get, Tom. Just to let you know.
You should probably keep those letters to yourself, Lisa. They sound very, very private.
Yeah, terribly so.
Claims data around about 50 minutes away, Tom, just to jump in and bring you in. Claims data 50 minutes away. Initial jobless claims, continuing claims. Big focus of this market.
It's got to be a big focus. And again, folks, for years and years and years, we looked at the weekly number and then the 4-week moving average. Many of you use, I use that all the time. And maybe we would population adjust it, which is a big fancy chart. Great. None of that matters. John, it's the vector and the rate of change of continuing claims. And that will be carefully scrutinized by those looking for a V-shaped form and those a lot more gloomier. It'll be a key data point here at 8:30.
8:30 Eastern, full coverage right here on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. We take it back to the airlines in just a moment. Delta says it will not book middle seats through September. Up next on this program, Bob Crandall, former American Airlines CEO, on a really rattled airline business worldwide. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Bramage. This is Bloomberg Surveillance, and we're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, as you were discussing, writing in a new book that President Trump asked for assistance from Chinese leader Xi Jinping to buy more U.S. farm products to help him win re-election. Bolton tells ABC News the relationship between President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin puts the U.S. in a difficult position.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think Putin is smart, tough. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh tells Bloomberg Television the allegations are absurd.
Look, I think what folks need to know about John Bolton is that he is now a disgruntled former employee, and in order to get this book deal that he's touting, he had to agree to include classified information that he had access to when he was working in the administration.
The White House is suing to stop the book's release. The Federal Reserve is beating the drum for more stimulus to stem the fallout from the coronavirus. Chairman Jerome Powell wants Congress to extend relief measures and says the Fed will continue to do its part.
We at the Fed need to keep our foot on the gas until we're really sure that we're through this, and that's certainly our intention. I think you may find that there's more for you to do as well.
Congress is currently deciding whether to renew expanded unemployment benefits. $600 a week payments are set to expire at the end of next month on July 31st. New York's governor has signed an executive order recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday for state employees, a day after Virginia's governor said he would do the same. Juneteenth is observed on June 19th. It commemorates the emancipation of slaves in the United States. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellett, brought to you by Grainger, offering supplies and solutions for every industry. Visit Grainger.com. The rate of positive coronavirus tests in the Orlando area has been soaring in recent days. The NBA is hoping that doesn't matter. After spending weeks putting together an incredibly elaborate series of health and safety protocols, the word testing, for example, appears 282 times in the document. The NBA and the National Basketball Players Association believe they have done what is necessary to keep the 22 teams and others who will be part of the season's restart at the Disney campus near Orlando next month safe and healthy. Most teams will arrive in Florida July 7th, 8th, or 9th. Premier League soccer is back in the United Kingdom. Stadiums do have fans, but they are restricted to around 300 people. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellett.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Our crystal ball is a little murkier than normal, but I do expect after Labor Day it's going to be an important milestone and pivot point for us, because that's typically when business travel starts to pick up again.
Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio with David Weston a little bit earlier this morning. A tough road ahead for this industry. From New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. Looking at your market this morning with equity futures down almost 20 points and off by 0.6% on the S&P 500. Taking a look at the bond market just quickly. Treasuries are bid. Yields are lower, down by 3 basis points on a 10-year to 0.71%. Just rounding that up for you. Just sub 150 on a 30-year. And in foreign exchange, to give you a feel of G10, the dollar largely stronger against the euro by not even 0.1%. Sterling is where your underperformance is. Pound sterling coming in by 0.4%. Off the back of that Bank of England decision, Tom, to keep rates unchanged, but to boost QE as expected by another 100 billion sterling.
Oh, very good. John Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keane. What we know is Ed Bastian of Delta always, at every moment, will listen to Robert Crandall. He's in his 84th year. Mr. Crandall is without question the spirit of the American aviation industry, and he's also someone who's been brutally frank. He is iconic for telling American Airlines employees they need to understand that you don't invest in airlines, you just have fun working for them, and we're thrilled that Mr. Crandall could join us this morning. Bob Crandall, this has been an exogenous shock that your industry has never felt before. What is the best practice for the American aviation industry to extract themselves from this pandemic?
Well, Tom, I think the airlines, all of the airlines have done pretty well. They're all, by the way, there's quite a nice recap in this morning's journal about what each individual carrier is doing. Delta, American, United, each one of them one by one, they're all working hard to try and persuade the public that it is safe to go back, that they won't get sick if they get on an airplane and take a trip. They go see grandma, they go see the grandkids, or if they go to a business meeting. The airlines obviously want the public to feel safe flying, and they're doing their best to make that part. They're cleaning the airplanes very assiduously. They are reducing the point-to-point contacts within the terminals, and they are increasing. And I'm glad to see this. They are becoming increasingly insistent that people wear masks on the airplane, which I think is a very important step. In any event, they're all working hard at it. And as Ed said a few minutes ago on your show, I think everybody is hoping that by the end of the summer, the public will feel a lot safer than they have felt up to this point, and that business travel will therefore resume.
Bob, the issue is what they have to do to make the public feel safe. And right now, they're capping capacity on those planes at 60%. I just wonder if you were running an airline again and had to cap capacity at 60% through year end, what are the hard decisions you'd have to make elsewhere?
Well, there are a lot of decisions you're going to have to make elsewhere, including how do you best reduce costs and conserve cash. After all, if you are capping lows and if you are not increasing prices dramatically, then obviously your cash flows are going to go way down. And what you've got to do is you've got to stay in the game. You've got to conserve enough cash so that you can get through this difficulty, so you can get to the point where we finally have a vaccine and people are finally able to go back to traveling the way they have in the past. That's a very difficult thing to do, and is inevitably going to involve furloughs of some people, perhaps voluntary furloughs, perhaps more part-time work. Each individual carrier, I think, is going to shape its response to cash conservation according to its own balance sheet and its own reading of what the public mood is.
Bob, there's a question when you talk about business travel resuming. A lot of companies are realizing they don't need to do the same kind of travel that they had in the past. I'm thinking in particular of road trips with respect to selling IPOs or even just face-to-face meetings that now can be done via Zoom. How long do you think it will take before business travel gets back up to levels that we saw last year? Do you ever think it will?
Lisa, I'm not sure. I think I don't think anybody's smart enough. I know I'm not smart enough to tell you precisely how the business community will respond to the sort of suspension of travel that we've had and the use of alternatives, like the alternative we are using this morning to talk to each other and talk to the public, but not be in the same place. I suspect that will over time reduce the cumulative amount of business travel somewhat. How much is anybody's guess. But I think it will be a long time before the airlines see as much business travel as they saw in the pre-COVID days of late 2019, early 2020.
Bob, always fantastic to get your unique insight on an industry that has really, really come under a ton of pressure over the last several months. Bob Crandall there, the former American Airlines CEO. Just a snapshot into some of the tough decisions, Tom Keene, that this industry has to make, and let's not beat around the bush, to survive. An industry in survival mode over the last several months.
Well, you really wonder after what we've seen, John, of Lufthansa and with the work at Ryan and British Air. I mean, it's not discussed in America, but will there be a more direct government subsidy to these airlines just to get to the other side? And, the jury's really out on that.
Quite possibly for some of them. Tom, you and I have reflected on this, that this industry is a snapshot for the broader market. We're focused on the sequential month-on-month growth, but not the limits of that growth and what ultimately below capacity economic growth is going to mean over the medium term. Now, I understand for markets in the short term, it's the bounce coming out of the lockdown, but below capacity economic growth has got to be something, Tom, that we all think about a whole lot more.
And I would go back to something that, John, I think has been underreported this week, which is the reaffirmation of HSBC to let go a few people. And I really wonder, going into the normal year end and the pre-bonus thinking, what will the greater global banking business do, just as one proxy of what we're seeing abruptly now in the aviation business?
Yeah, more broadly for the labour market, Lisa, you've talked about that second wave of job cuts that could be coming in the next several months as we wait for that data in America, 35 minutes away.
The question that I have, and Tom touched on this, what's going to be the bridge to get us to the other side? My question is, what's the other side going to look like? And these job cut numbers that we're going to see, the jobless claims, don't speak to the composition and how much that's changing, how many people have to be retrained or think of new careers heading out of the pandemic, John.
Well, the bridge to the other side was the debt market wide open. The other side has a lot of debt in it. I think we can all confirm that. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Farrow, together with Lisa Abramowitz as we count you down to that economic data in America, 34 minutes away in around about 15 seconds. Equity futures roll over. We're down 0.8% and negative 25 points. From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Asset.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again. And surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
This is a message from the government. Some businesses are now able to welcome back their employees and customers. To keep everyone safe, it's important you follow government guidance and make your workplace COVID secure. Businesses should carry out COVID-19 risk assessments, put in place hygiene procedures, and help staff and customers keep a safe distance. Talk to your employees, listen to their concerns, and if possible, help them to work from home. Every workplace is different, but by following this guidance, you can get back to business safely and play your part in managing the risk of infection. Visit gov.uk/working-safely for more information. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. EPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
Have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
As businesses, as consumers, we have to make our decisions knowing that there is this deadly disease swirling around out there.
These kinds of aggressive policies do lead to misallocations of capital.
I think it's important for the credibility of policymakers to follow through on the commitments they've made.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Bramwitz, and Tom Keene, our simulcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. Thank you for joining us, particularly those of you still sequestered at your homes. We greatly appreciate the attendance, and the attendance today, and the attention, I should say, is focused on the nation's capital. Maybe it's an uproar to you, maybe it's not. It is certainly an uproar inside the Beltway. If you've been sleeping overnight, the Trump administration takes further judicial action against the former National Security Advisor, Dr. John Bolton. His new book is out. I call it the Bolton Papers. And trust me, it is out, and has been in the news. Ritika Gupta will give you a brief on that. And we thank Kevin Cirilli for joining us at length in the last hour as well. Jonathan Farrow, I'm thrilled to talk to you about this. It must seem so foreign to see this. How do you, John, as being from the motherland, how do you see all of these First Amendment debates within America?
I'm not sure the United States would like to refer to the UK as the motherland this morning, Tom, so I'll avoid my own personal opinion on the matter. I do think it's absolutely amazing, though, just to witness what is happening, which is a man, John Bolton, with the rare ability to upset pretty much everyone. I reflected on this in the last hour, upsetting the Democrats because he did not testify. And the fact that the Democrats are upset is just fuel for the White House, who can say this is just a disgruntled employee who did not say these things when he was a member of the White House and waited to say them when he published his book.
And what's interesting, Lisa, and of course this harkens back to 1971 and the Pentagon Papers, the distinctions of classified and non-classified. I was really struck, Lisa, by the vehemence, the energy of First Amendment experts such as Noah Feldman writing for Bloomberg Opinion. They were forceful in their essays yesterday.
Well, I think that there's that legal consideration, whether the book can be published. A lot of people saying, look, it's going to be. This just will sell more of them. There is also a question about the political season that we're entering. And I think that this is an issue that is weighing on some people in markets, saying this could be a considerable risk. I am trying to understand what this risk is, how much the market will sell off if President Trump looks like he won't get reelected. That seemed to be the sort of feeling in the tape yesterday, expected to be an ongoing theme going forward into November.
Maybe one of the linkages of the Bolton uproar into our world here at Bloomberg Surveillance, folks, is the comments on China. President Xi and the president will have much more on that across the Bloomberg platform today. Right now, we want to dovetail in claims coming up here in 27 minutes. We want to dovetail in the rate structure, and particularly what we saw with the Haldane dissent at the Bank of England, with where are we right now? Meg McKellen is at J.P. Morgan. One of her great distinctions is not only is she in the gaming of investment, the strategy of asset management, but she had a wonderful career as a trader as well. Meg, let me start with a trader question. Is the bid right now on the market, is it a real bid or is it just fragile and fictitious?
Well, I certainly think from the price action you're seeing some real money. One of the interesting dynamics following the rally and the drop in developed market rates, specifically in the U.S., has actually been a surge in overseas interest, and specifically that's passing through into credit markets. So on top of the extraordinary stimulus, you're seeing relative value buyers emerge from places where they've been a bit in hiding for a few months.
So I'm wondering, Meg, a lot of people are talking about the shadow banking industry, the private credit industry, and how it's played such a big role in disintermediating the big banks. And I'm wondering how much you're seeing the delinquencies and the defaults being reflected in that space in a similar manner as we're seeing in the more public firms, more or less. What are we seeing there?
So one of the great things and features in the private credit markets is the ability to think about structure and really work between lender and borrower. I think in our markets, there'll be a while for things to kind of play through. I do think, though, that you're seeing early signs. So, for example, yesterday, an article, a number of distressed advisors petitioned Congress to appoint 250 more bankruptcy judges. So just to give a sense of what we think is coming, there's concern that the U.S. court system could be overwhelmed. So certainly I would keep an eye on the data coming in through our markets. And again, with the understanding there's a bit of a lag and a lot more flexibility in terms of working with the borrowers. I think one of the places where we do have some very interesting data coming in is actually in our real estate team. So we do real estate equity and lending as well. And we're seeing rents and rent collections start to stabilize, but there's still a huge bifurcation between retail, which averages about 90% rent collection historically and is coming in around potentially half, even a little bit lower than that, versus things like office and multifamily, which have stabilized in kind of the mid-90s. So again, there's big bifurcations in the data we're seeing in terms of property types. And certainly that's flowing through in terms of our outlook for how different lending markets will look going forward.
Let's go there. Let's go to real estate, in particular commercial real estate, since people have been talking about the death of the office in the wake of the pandemic. Are you starting to see value there, or are you starting to see people perhaps being overly optimistic that we're going to return to some sort of normal on the other side of this?
So we're engaging from a debt space, and we're seeing really just a huge amount of opportunity for lenders to step in where your traditional lenders have had to step back a little bit. So if you think about the nature of the commercial real estate debt markets, you've got the real estate debt funds, which have had some issues with mark to market. You've got the kind of banks, which are taking, I think, a little bit of a breather right now and thinking about some of their credit risk and portfolio. The CMBS markets, they're opening back up, but there's still a huge amount of dislocation and bifurcation. So, new issuance isn't anywhere near as robust as it would need to be to turn that spigot back on. So there's a huge role for private lending there. So whether it's performing loans or non-performing loans, to your point, you want to be really careful about the underlying types of assets that you're buying. And one of the big questions we ask ourselves is, where is there temporary disruption? So temporary disruption to cash flow versus value destruction, and that may be some of the exacerbation of the larger retail trends that you spent some time on.
Meg, do you see any of that pain outside of retail, that permanent valuation destruction?
I think there would be more of a value shift. So certainly just even within retail, thinking about things like how people will shop going forward. In our data, what we're seeing is, very low collections for closed malls, but the non-mall open-air population is actually, a relatively, I don't want to say healthy, but a much better collection. So I think, within retail, there will be, kind of strength emerging in certain places that maybe is accelerated by the pandemic.
Meg, I got one final question, and I want to take it back to Chicago mathematics. And that the geometry that we're in right now is a complete fiction off of all the theory that we learned in the textbooks, whether it was Markowitz or Bill Sharp or even the great Gene Fama as well. What theory are you using day to day to give you confidence in the markets? So
in our investment thesis, what we're seeing is where the stimulus has missed, the opportunity persists. And so what's happening is in credit markets, well, a number of the borrowers may be getting some ancillary benefits from a lot of the extraordinary stimulus that's taking place. There still are significant parts where lending cannot be touched directly by the existing programs, and that's really where we're seeing value, where we think that the underlying asset has a really strong case if you do end up becoming an owner-operator. And in the meantime, we feel confident that working with the borrower, we can make our way through this at a really attractive risk-adjusted return. And you're looking at the private markets versus the public markets. The public markets have gapped back in so forcefully. Just looking at credit spreads this morning, recovering, to kind of halfway off of the wides in terms of even some of the lower-rated credits in the public markets. In the private markets, we are still lending at near all-time wides where we actually can get more protection for our lenders. And that's the same level of confidence that we have in terms of the property valuation and the underlying asset value. So the private markets right now are really the place to find value. And I don't know if I need a textbook theory to tell me that. It's really, just this extraordinary nature of a private transaction where we really can risk assess and structure to meet a good risk-adjusted return for investors.
Meg, we're lucky to have you on the programme this morning. So good morning to you, and my best to you and yours. Thank you for giving us your time. Megan McLennan there of JP Morgan Asset Management. Tom Keene, there is a weight to this tape. We are down 32 on the S&P and negative around about 1 full percentage point, 20 minutes away from claims data in America.
Well, it's been flighty to say the least. And John, you look at what we saw last week, really a week ago right now, and then the enthusiasms of Monday and Tuesday and lassitude. I mean, I can't give you a here, now, and why other than maybe nervousness before that economic data.
Lisa, Meg was talking about credit spreads. Investment grade spreads aren't quite at the tights of the year and certainly nowhere near the tights of the last cycle. But if you're looking at borrowing costs for investment grade companies in isolation, as investors, you might look at spread, but for the company, what are my borrowing costs? And Lisa, they are low, low, low.
They're actually at a new record, a record low of 2.17%, which to me is pretty interesting considering the fact that the actual fundamentals are getting worse, that leverage is increasing, that the potential revenue streams are declining. And it raises a question about the future. In other words, how much will this drag on growth? How will these companies pay it back? And are investors getting compensated for the risk? Right now, investors are looking to hide out in those higher rated companies, and they're getting compensated not that much for it, John.
Well, you can thank the Federal Reserve for that one as well. Coming up on this programme, we'll turn the conversation to China. John Bolton doing what he does best, dropping some real bombs. This time, it's on the trade deal between China and the United States. That conversation is coming up next with Leland Miller of the China Beige Book from New York City this morning. Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. President Trump's former national security advisor says the president isn't fit for office, in part because he was solely focused on his political fortunes. John Bolton tells ABC News the president doesn't have the competence to carry out the job and writes in his book that Russia's Vladimir Putin believes he can play President Trump, quote, like a fiddle.
When you're dealing with somebody like Putin, who has made his life understanding Russia's strategic position in the world, against Donald Trump, who doesn't enjoy reading about these issues or learning about them, it's a very difficult position for America to be in.
President Trump tells Fox that by writing and publishing the book, Bolton committed a crime.
But he broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified. That's the highest stage. It's highly classified information.
The Trump campaign calls the allegations absurd, and the White House is suing to stop the book's release. Rising coronavirus infections are stoking concerns in several states, hospitalizations climbing in Arizona and Texas. Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida says they're testing more people, which is why their numbers are going up. But Dr. Aileen Marty at Florida International University says that's not why.
The bottom line is we're seeing more hospitalizations, and that's not from increased testing. That's from real people who are needing hospital care. That means true increase in cases.
And Oregon is joining the list of hotspots. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our number one priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
Not a uniquely Chinese phenomenon, but we all understand that in China, certainly this year, there has been a marked kind of tilt towards a more truculent, nationalistic kind of bias in terms of the conduct of its international relations.
George Magnus of the University of Oxford on the geopolitical tension we're seeing at the moment, with China at the heart of much of it on many levels. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together, of course, with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio in your equity market. Ahead of the opening bell and just ahead of economic data in the United States, equity futures bouncing off the low, still negative 0.75% on the S&P 500. A bid came into the bond market in a sizable way in the last hour as well. 10-year yields come in, call it 4 basis points, down to 0.7%. Your 30-year right now, Tom, sub 5 basis points on a session. 148 is your yield.
Yeah, a little bit of market action there, John. 12 minutes away from the claims number. We'll give you that, of course, and discuss further in our next half hour. Right now, and you just heard from George Magnus in his wonderful book on President Xi, but you just heard from George Magnus. Who does George Magnus listen to? He listens to Leland Miller. Miller has come out of Washington and Lee University and carved out a career as the absolute definitive micro-analyst of China. No one, and I mean no one, folks, does it better than Leland Miller of trying to figure out what rail traffic or what electric utility rates are doing to China and what it signals. So, Leland, let me get right to it. In your China beige book, what do you see of interior demand dynamics across Great China?
Well, one of the major problems, because the last several months haven't been synchronized, since the beginning of the year hasn't been synchronized with the Chinese economy shutting down and then most of the rest of the world shutting down after that, is that firms that have relied on export orders are doing really, really poorly right now, which means the coast. So the interior, you're seeing much better numbers right now in the interior simply because they're not and they are banking on a domestic rebound, which you'll see as the Chinese recovery incrementally gets better over this year. So right now, China doesn't want to be relying on its interior provinces, but that's where the growth is right now, while the coast really feels some pain.
Well, let's talk about Beijing, Leland. Really, really hard to get a read on what is actually happening on the ground in China at the moment. Some people have told me, watch what they do, not what they say. What they say is that they've got a small outbreak of COVID infections. What they're doing is cancelling flights and closing schools again. What's your read on things at the moment?
Well, yeah, if you look at the numbers, it looks like this very micro blip that you see all over the world, particularly the United States right now. But the important thing is it's in Beijing, and Beijing has symbolic power for the Chinese Communist Party. So if they lose control of that city, then you have a potential political crisis on their hands, in addition to economic repercussions. So what the government is doing is very much the opposite of what they were talking about doing a few months ago. When they started coming out of the COVID shutdown, they forced everyone back to work. It was a very aggressive move back. We're going to get everyone back and running and damn the consequences. But when it comes to Beijing, they're doing the opposite. They're being extremely careful. They're shutting everything down. They want to make sure that Beijing is not the center of a new outbreak for symbolic reasons, as well as the fact that it's the major political center of power.
And Leland, one major political issue is the jobs picture. And we've heard from George Magnus that while the official rate of joblessness is about 5.9%, he estimated it at 15 to 20%. Is that accurate? Is that what your figures are showing as well?
Yeah, I think George, as usual, was right. The problem here is that when you track employment in China, and look, the government gauges don't even try to get into it because they don't want to tell the negative story. But even when you do things like China Beige Book's job gauges, you have a problem in that firms typically report formal employment. And there's this floating migrant population that is in this set of hiatus from being paid right now. Some are furloughed. They haven't been laid off technically, but some haven't been rehired back. When they get rehired back, you sometimes see a bump in the jobs number, even though they weren't laid off in the first place. So there's a very weird, opaque universe that the Chinese will never announce, because if they came out with a number that said 15 or 20%, people would lose their minds the same way if they announced 1% GDP growth. So these are the types of numbers that you just can't pay attention to. The situation is much worse, but you don't know what the exact numbers are behind the scenes.
Leland, one thing that we are seeing is that the PBOC is planning to increase credit in the economy by nearly a fifth this year. This according to an announcement overnight. A lot of people saying this isn't enough. What's your take?
Yeah, it's not enough, but there's a couple things going on. It's not just about the supply of credit. So when I look at our credit gauges, I'm shocked by what I'm seeing, because you would expect the same type of liquidity rollout that you saw in the United States or in Europe. You're not seeing that in China. And you could understand some restraint because they are worried about non-performing loans, but the levels are quite shocking. And we're going to have numbers on those coming out next week, but it's looking pretty surprising. But the opposite of that is the demand picture, and the fact that a lot of firms aren't asking for loans right now. And when you have this reduced loan demand, it begs the question, why during this extremely trying time are firms not more desirous of loans? Is it because they don't like the economic horizon? They're worried about piling on loans during an uncertain economic environment? Is it because of other credit dynamics? So this is really the big picture. Yes, look at supply, but loan demand is going to be the absolute key thing to watch for the next 3 or 4 months.
Leland Miller of China Beige Book International, the CEO, on the situation in China right now. Fascinating stuff, Tom. The labour market, absolutely critical. And the very fact that people think the Chinese Communist Party can't tell you how bad things are because they're worried about social instability. And social instability, let's be clear, is an existential risk to the Chinese Communist Party. It makes it so difficult to get a clear read on the second largest economy in so many ways, Tom.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And what's so important to me, John, is, we're staggering from, Valentine's Day in March, and everybody had a nice framework out to May, and now we're the middle of June, and there's no framework. Nobody has a framework in America, or certainly in China, John, say to the middle of September. So the mystery level here everywhere, and particularly, as you say, in China, is unprecedented. It's just truly,
well, let's talk about the June data. as well, Tom. The June data, 5 minutes away for jobless claims. Lisa, everybody's trying to work out what the bounce looks like coming out of this contraction. We all assume that it tails off in the coming months, but I don't want to completely disregard what we've seen, which is a massive upside surprise on several readings, including retail sales this week and payrolls a couple of Fridays ago. Are we going to see that validated in a significant improvement in claims? The data, 5 minutes away.
We didn't see it last week. We saw a less than expected decline in the continuing claims, which I'm watching very closely. And just a reminder, in the U.S., it's been very difficult to even collect the data because the more distressed households haven't been responding to the surveys the way they have in the past, John.
Jobless claims in America, 4 minutes, 23 seconds away. Full coverage right here on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, with equity futures bouncing off the lows, down 0.6% from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda, the power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
This is a message from the government. Some businesses are now able to welcome back their employees and customers. To keep everyone safe, it's important you follow government guidance and make your workplace COVID secure. Businesses should carry out COVID-19 risk assessments, put in place hygiene procedures, and help staff and customers keep a safe distance. Talk to your employees, listen to their concerns, and if possible, help them to work from home. Every workplace is different, but by following this guidance, you can get back to business safely and play your part in managing the risk of infection. Visit gov.uk/working safely for more information. Stay alert, control the virus, Save lives.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. For our audience worldwide, we're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abraris as we await the economic data in America. Jobless claims on deck, with equity futures recovering just a little bit, bouncing off session lows, down 0.6%. Here's the data. Let's cross over to Bloomberg's Mike McKee.
Well, John, we got a bounce in the wrong direction in terms of jobless claims. We see a figure of 1,508,000. That's an increase of, well, wait a minute. That's a decrease of 58,000 because the previous week was revised higher. A little confusing when you do jobless claims, but it is certainly much more than anticipated by the markets. The consensus forecast was 1,290,000. Continuing claims, that's the number everybody wants to see these days, and the continuing claims number is 20,544,000. That's a decrease of 62,000 from the revised previous week. Now remember, that's 2 weeks ago. Jobless claims, initial claims last week, continuing claims 2 weeks ago. So we are seeing a bit of a decline, but not much statistically involved here. Pandemic insurance claims rise, 760,526 in the week ending June 13th. That is an increase of 66,000. These are the people who get unemployment who aren't usually eligible for it, freelance workers and for gig workers, things like that. And let me just quickly check here and see the number of people, the states reporting big changes. California up 27,000, Massachusetts up 17,000, Arizona up 2,355. I was trying to see if there's any connection with the latest outbreaks of the COVID virus, but so far, no. Of course, those are for the weekend in June 6th, so we may want to keep an eye on some of those states.
Mike, you and I have been talking about this over the last couple of weeks. We've seen some huge upside surprises. Saw it with retail sales, saw it with the payrolls report, see it this morning with the Philly Fed, a massive upside surprise. Yet claims does not validate the significant improvement that we're seeing in data elsewhere. This for me is a head scratcher, Mike. Where are you on it right now?
Well, the problem is a lot of these numbers are overlapping and a little bit old. The claims numbers, of course, a week old in terms of initial claims, 2 weeks old in terms of continuing claims, and there are definitional differences between the claims numbers and what we see in the jobs reports. The interesting thing that people may want to start watching is some of this information on the Philadelphia Fed, because the anecdotal numbers are going to be helpful in giving us a picture of what's going on, even if we don't know what the actual numbers are. The Philly Fed Employment Index is still negative at negative 4.3, but it was negative 15.3 last month. So overall, companies aren't hiring in the Philadelphia region, but they are less pessimistic about their payrolls than they were, maybe letting fewer people go. That's about all you can do at this point, is try to square the circles.
Michael McKee on the latest data. Mike, great to catch up with you, sir. Thank you. Tom Keene, looking at this data, it doesn't validate some of the exuberance that we've seen elsewhere, some real improvement. Yeah. And imagine for the bulls, for the optimists out there, they'll look at that Philly Fed outlook and say, look, people expect things to get better. Things are getting better, week on week, month on month. I think for the pessimists, they want to see those claims come down and come down quickly as we reopen.
Yeah, John, I want to sit on this for a little bit before we get to Tony Rodriguez of Nuveen to really talk about bond market dynamics. But, John, on an economic basis, all I can do is go back to the religion of those that believe in high-frequency data, whether it's Carl Weinberg of high-frequency economics, or I think of Drew Mattis at MetLife, the same idea. John, I can't emphasize enough how these pros look at this countable weekly data as religion. And they clearly tilt to the tone of this versus the other things, as Michael correctly said, like Philadelphia, which is more circumspect and more anecdotal, I should say.
Well, Lisa, I think the difficulty, and you touched on the heart of it, coming into the print, collecting the numbers, the quirks beneath the labour market, the things that distorted the number for the May payrolls report, and the things distorting the number this morning that we're still trying to work through and smooth out.
Well, it's hard for some of the individuals who are working at the Bureau of Labor Statistics to actually get in touch with all of the families, and especially the families that are in the most trouble are the ones that aren't responding to these surveys. There haven't been as many responses. There are all of these kinks within the jobs data that have factored into the lack of accuracy. Also, how do you categorize someone who's furloughed? Are they employed or are they unemployed? And these are all questions that sort of factored into the May report, which will only confuse the matter more in June. So far, to your point, John, not confirming the optimism. We are seeing yields on 10-year treasuries at session lows. You're seeing 5-year yields, same kind of pressure here. And you're seeing equity futures head lower as people take a look at this and say perhaps the economic data isn't as good as perhaps some of the other indicators were suggesting.
Equity futures down 24, Tom. Negative 0.75% on the S&P 500.
Yeah, thank you, John, for bringing that up. We've certainly seen a deterioration there as well. Joining us now, Tony Rodriguez. He is at Nuveen. What is so good about him is he worked for years at the acclaimed General Electric Investment Fund, which was just really a set of smart people on the dynamics of credit. He's now with, of course, the legendary bond analyst in Chicago at Nuveen. Tony Rodriguez, thank you for joining us this morning. How do you interpret this economic data over to people's ability to find a nominal yield of merit or a real yield of any substance? How do you as a bond guy fold in this difficult economic data?
Well, good morning, Tom, and nice to be with you. I think that today's data in particular, I think, brings in a little bit more sobering perspective than what people were feeling after seeing the kind of outsized gains in retail sales and the surprising numbers on the employment side with the employment report. And this, I would say, is more consistent with kind of what Jay Powell has been saying in his congressional testimony, where he's been giving a little bit more of a kind of, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but I would say a more sober view of where the economy is heading. We in Nuveen are not in the camp of a V-shaped recovery. We think it'll be a more gradual, bumpy recovery. I think when you're talking about continuing claims still over 20 million, initial claims that are 1.5 million, I think that really speaks to the fact that there will be a bumpy recovery because consumer spending, as we all know, is such a key driver of the U.S. economy. And if you have that many people that are still on unemployment claims, don't have a job, it's going to be difficult for the U.S. economy to come roaring back in the V-shaped form that maybe some of the optimists, I would argue, equity market seem to be thinking.
Well, Tony, let's talk about the bounce. We've had the contraction, the shutdown. Now we're experiencing the bounce. And like you, many others expect things to flatten out after late summer. I'm just wondering what you're learning from the bounce so far. I don't want to totally disregard the bounce that we're seeing in the data elsewhere, because we are seeing significant upside surprises. How important are they?
I think that the bounce is important because for us what it said was, okay, the depth of the second quarter recession wasn't going to be quite as low, and the recovery would be a little bit faster, but not to the extent of changing it to a V-shape recovery by any means. So I think when you really evaluate what's going on with the data, it makes you kind of understand that what's keeping the markets where they are, whether it's rates where they are, credit spreads where they are, I would argue even equity valuations where they are, is clearly coming down to the Fed and fiscal policy, and I think the primary driver being the Fed. When you have them pinning rates at the zero lower bound, they're forcing people to find income elsewhere, pushing them out the risk curve. And when you have a balance sheet that is growing as aggressively as it is, along with other central banks, you essentially have a Fed put that gives investors confidence that if we see a deterioration in data, then we're going to see the Fed and other central banks just come in with larger bazookas and increase their purchases to support risk assets.
And Tony, perhaps that's what you're seeing in equities that are off the lows after this weaker than expected data. Given the whole don't fight the Fed and the fact that that is the predominant factor in market activity recently, Tony, why not just go into the riskiest assets? I keep asking this question, but there still is a conservative investment thesis among many investors. And I'm wondering what it will take for them to lose that given the Fed support.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Lisa. And from our perspective at Nuveen, we would argue that the highest quality assets, so call it mortgage-bound, the run agency mortgages and treasuries, the Fed has completely brought those markets back to where they are no longer very attractive on a relative value basis. When you think about the very lowest quality segments of the market, that's where we feel the Fed is too fearful to tread. So they're not going to be in the lowest quality, high yield emerging markets. But it's in that mid-quality space where, A, they are operating, so they have programs in place to go into the investor-grade credit market, to go into the securitized markets. That support, which then also kind of reverberates out into maybe the highest quality segments of high yield, so in the BB space, there, that mid-quality segment of the market is where I think you can be comfortable that you're benefiting from all of the Fed and global central bank activity, but you're not as exposed to what is obviously the very difficult economic picture that we see for a lot of companies, a lot of industries, as we move through the balance of this year and even through the first half and most of 2021.
Tony Rodriguez, always great to catch up with you, Tony. Thanks for joining us. Joining us from Nuveen Asset Management, the head of fixed income strategy. The data on the labour market, huge upside surprise a couple of Fridays ago in the payrolls report. Tom, I keep saying it just has not been validated, followed up by a significant improvement in claims data. I think we all want to see continuing claims start to drift lower and drift lower quickly.
I have immense respect for this. I got in a massive pissing match years ago, John Farrow, with the wonderful Jack Welch, the late Jack Welch, great guy, when he went after the statistical people of BLS. And I said to Jack, I said, look, at the end of the day, all that matters is countable. And the magic of this Thursday data, frankly, even compared to the jobs report, is accountability of it. And I thought Michael McKee did a great job on that. I have immense respect for like a 4-week moving average of continuing claims that we will see, say, July 15th or maybe August 1st.
What was that, Tom? A what match? Can you say that on TV and radio? A what match?
Really, John? It was really Jack Welch. I mean, that's the way you talk with Jack Welch.
I know what you can say after 9 p.m. in the evening in the United Kingdom. I'm just not sure what you can say in the morning here in the United States. From the United States, from New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz from New York this morning. Good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
All right, Tom, and good morning to you. Prosecutors say the Atlanta police officer who killed Rayshard Brooks at a fast food restaurant parking lot kicked him after shooting him in the back and did not give him medical attention for more than 2 minutes. Prosecutors have charged Garrett Worf with murder and is recommending no bond. A second officer was charged with aggravated assault. House Republicans are set to unveil their policing reform measure today. The bill is expected to mirror legislation introduced by Senate Republicans yesterday. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton writes in a new book that President Trump asked for assistance from Chinese leader Xi Jinping to buy more U.S. farm products to help him win re-election. Bolton tells ABC News the relationship between President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin also puts the U.S. in a difficult position.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think Putin is smart, tough. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
And the White House is suing to stop that book's release. The Federal Reserve now beating the drum for more stimulus to stem the fallout from the coronavirus. Chairman Jerome Powell wants Congress to extend relief measures.
We at the Fed need to keep our foot on the gas until we're really sure that we're through this, and that's certainly our intention. I think you may find that there's more for you to do as well.
We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Another economist is forecasting the commercial real estate market is headed for more pain.
Seems to me that there will be quite a large divergence.
Michelle Meyer is head of U.S. economics at Bank of America.
If it is the case, which a lot of surveys suggest, that companies will move more towards embracing a work from home or a virtual reality to some extent, in part because the virus will still be outstanding before there's a vaccine, but even after, the efficiencies that come about from working from home and having a more remote workforce can be quite beneficial. So, you could see how commercial real estate suffers in that environment where you just don't need as many office buildings, you don't need as much concentration of those office buildings in city centers, maybe you don't need as many retail shops as well, given the switch towards online. So, this is the extreme period right now because of the lockdown, of course.
And Meyer says things will never go back to the way they were. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
This does assume, by the way, all of this assumes that the virus remains reasonably well under control and doesn't experience an event where virus rises widely across the nation. Let's just assume that doesn't happen.
We all hope that won't happen. That was Chairman Powell after 2 days of testimony on Capitol Hill, where it got tense in the last 24 hours on the subject of fiscal policy. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Tom Keene, I'm about to step away, but in about 10 minutes' time on Bloomberg TV, I'll be catching up with Erin Brown of PIMCO on whether traditional valuation methods still apply in a world dominated by central bank QE and low interest rates.
I can't emphasize enough, John, how important that question is. We talked to Meg McClellan about that moments ago. You just really wonder if traditional valuation or, core theory, whatever you want to do, define it, if it plays out here. That will be most interesting as well. What we'd like to do is have an important conversation now with the gentle lady from Utah. Vivian Lee is with Verily. Of course, a storied career in health academics and health medicine. We're thrilled Dr. Lee could join us, and The Long Fix is her important book on healthcare and healthcare solutions in America. Dr. Lee, I can't have a normal conversation. Utah and the mountain states down to Arizona having a new epidemic of the pandemic. Give us an update on what Utah sees with the COVID virus.
Well, great to be with you, Tom. And as you know, a couple of years ago,
Up until a couple of years ago, I was leading the University of Utah's healthcare system, and now really have been full of admiration for the way in which that state has been managing the crisis, really had been keeping it and has been among the lowest in the country. But as we're seeing now, all across the country, places that we thought were going to survive, relatively unscathed, they're seeing these upticks in the COVID crisis. And it's just all the more important that we recognize that the guidance that we're hearing from our public health officials, we need much more testing. We need to do the social distancing and masking. Those are just ever more imperative now. No one is immune.
I have to ask the professional question, and that one of the most piercing comments we had was with the chief radiologist at Mount Sinai on the virus. You are a radiologist. What have you learned about the inflammation around the chest cavity in this virus? What do you discern about how we can battle this virus, vaccine or no vaccine, in terms of the cavity of the body?
What is so striking about this virus is the fact that there are so many people who feel pretty good. They actually are relatively asymptomatic. And even though they walk around, they don't necessarily feel a fever, they don't necessarily have a cough, they actually are COVID positive. And we've seen from the reports and the literature that they actually have findings on their chest CT scans. They have abnormal findings in their lungs. That virus is affecting them, but they're not manifesting it in symptoms. And that's really, I think we're hearing just yesterday, the FDA issued a guidance that said, look, none of these tests for COVID are approved for wide-scale testing of people who are asymptomatic, but they acknowledged that is going to be necessary, that we are going to need to test people who are asymptomatic. And they actually provided templates for laboratories and for manufacturers to get that approval to be able to test asymptomatic people for COVID. And that's going to be a critical component of getting people back to work, getting students back to campuses. We're going to have a strategy, because we're seeing from taking the images, as you say, of people who actually feel fine, that they are infected, and that means they are also infectious. They can spread that disease to other people, and we need to identify those folks and be able to quarantine them to protect everyone else.
Meanwhile, Dr. Lee, we have seen the resurgence in cases in places like Arizona and Texas and Florida, with anecdotal accounts of the ICU beds getting filled up and a shortage being highlighted of general practitioners and ICU nurses. What do you see as some of the ways to fill that gap that is so sorely being reflected in this pandemic of general practitioners, of nurses who perhaps haven't been favored as far as a professional career because they haven't been as well paid perhaps as some of the more highly compensated specialists?
One of the things that the COVID crisis is laying bare is the fundamental shortcomings of our healthcare system. We are a fee-for-service healthcare system, meaning that our healthcare hospitals are designed to focus on things that generate fees. And as soon as those fees start going away, like the primary care clinics, like all of the hospital beds that were not caring for COVID, we had to lay people off. The April data showed we laid almost 1.5 million healthcare workers off. Last month was a little bit better. 300,000 were rehired, but that's still almost 1.2 million healthcare workers. And, the majority are nurses and also dentists as well as physicians. And that's just a tragedy, because the people who are being laid off are exactly the folks that we need to care for the most vulnerable. We see that the people who are, across the country, and they're the ones we need to get back into work.
Now, Vivian Lee, I need to be in the timeout chair of Dr. Lee, because we spent no time on your wonderful book, The Long Fix. We will have you back on soon to talk about an important book, folks, on what actually can be done to begin to fix this amazing and a mess, the American medical system. Vivian Lee with us this morning, the author of The Long Fix. Lisa, the long fix may be the long fix to get claims back down to, what do you say, 210,000? Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still at 1.5 million. And just to give you a sense of the latest picture that we got from initial claims, the job market improvement is the slowest since the firings peaked out. So we are seeing a plateauing in the improvements. And it really raises questions, Tom, about how much we can see the ongoing upside surprises that we've seen in the economic data, or whether this was a bounce that won't be able to sustain itself in the upcoming weeks and months.
We began the morning, Lisa, with Gina Martin Adams talking about the correction, the corrective move that we see. Day 3 of that corrective move. Yeah, future's a little soggy. An hour ago, John Farrow had that mathematics. Right now, negative 17 on futures. Dow futures negative 189. The VIX shows the lethargy, maybe a little bit of tension there with a backup of one big figure, 34.69 on the VIX. We'll have to watch that. I immediately go here to the 2-year yield, truly pegged at a 0.19% as well. I want to set up the rest of this Thursday after the economic data, and I think it will be not only a listen of what's going on in economics, finance, and investment, but I really want to draw your attention to the breaking news you may see from Bloomberg in Washington. Craig Gordon and our team, and of course Kevin Cirilli's good work as well on this matter of the Bolton Papers. We thank you so much for joining us this morning. Much more through the morning. Please stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Business is in line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, you must now wear a face covering at all times, avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Let's tune in. Sports on this day. On this day in 1960, Arnold Palmer staged the greatest comeback in U.S. Open tournament history by erasing a 7-stroke final round deficit to win his only Open title by 2 strokes ahead of Jack Nicklaus.
I won the Open at Cherry Hills is something that I enjoyed very much. And of course, some of the shots that I hit
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Thursday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Jobless claims, they came in at 1.5 million. That was higher than the estimate of about 1.3 million. This marks the 11th week of deceleration. That's the good news, but also the 13th week of claims above a million, so stubbornly high here. Equity futures point to a lower opening. Treasury yields coming in as well. To get a sense of where the action is in pre-market trading, let's turn to Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this Thursday morning?
Well, I'm looking at the travel stocks as has been the norm for the past few months. You're seeing some relatively small declines in the group. That said, there's enough news about the companies that it's worth kind of going through. You look at Delta Airlines, it's down 3% in early trading. The carrier estimated third quarter flight capacity will be down as much as 60% from normal levels. CEO Ed Bastian told shareholders it may take 3 years to get back to normal. You look at other airlines, they're down as well. American also off 3%, and United lower by 4.5%. Carnival's down 6.5%. The cruise line company had a fiscal second quarter loss of $4.4 billion and said it can't predict when operations will resume. Carnival's adjusted loss was wider than analysts' average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. You're seeing Royal Caribbean down 3.5%, Norwegian down 4.5% in early trading. Kroger off just 0.5%. The supermarket chain's lower, even though fiscal first quarter earnings surpassed estimates and sales jumped 12% more than analysts were expecting. Now, Kroger declined to update fiscal year forecast made in April, though it's expecting to surpass the projections. You've got a deal in the insurance business. Athene Holding up 3%. This is a company backed by the buyout firm Apollo Global. They agreed to buy a stake in Jackson National Life Insurance for $500 million and to back some of the company's annuities. Now, Jackson National is owned by the UK insurer Prudential, which isn't related to the U.S. company Prudential Financial. You've got U.S. Steel. Most active stock in early trading down 13.5%. The steelmaker is raising $429 million in a share sale equivalent to a 23% stake. U.S. Steel is selling the stock after forecasting yesterday that it's headed for a fourth straight quarterly loss. And when we talk about share sales, we have to mention Hertz Global Holdings. It's down 8% in early trading. The bankrupt rental car company's plans to sell as much as $500 million of stock are on hold. The sales were suspended yesterday after U.S. regulators objected. And I have to talk about the move of the day. It's a company called Alpine Immune Sciences. The ticker is ALPN. Goes into the day with an $87 million market value. It's up 250% in early trading. The company made a deal to license a lupus treatment to AbbVie. They're going to get an upfront payment of $60 million and as much as $805 million in future payments if the drug's ultimately approved and sold. So Alpine Immune Sciences, the mover of the day so far.
Biotech stocks, it's like going to Las Vegas, red or black. It's just extraordinary investing in those. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Looking at the VIX here, which is something Tom likes to do often, a little bit of a rise here, up a little more than a point here to 35, but it just kind of gives us a sense to step back and pause and think about volatility in the marketplace. Pre-pandemic, that VIX was 12, 14, 16 115 on the VIX, and it reached as high as 80 during the rapid sell down in March and April. So that's volatility in the marketplace, and that generally is not good for emerging markets. But let's check in on those emerging markets with Damian Sassower, Bloomberg Intelligence Chief Emerging Market Strategist. Damian, thanks so much for joining us here once again. Give us a sense of kind of how your market has been behaving over the last couple of weeks. As you know, we've seen a little bit of a weakness in the broader markets tied to maybe a resurgence in some of these states and countries around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just cut to the chase here, Paul. I mean, the fact of the matter is, at the TRO back in March, I mean, EM dollar debt was down something on the order of 13% on the year. EM local currency bonds were down 15%. Now EM dollar debt is flat on the year, and local government EM bonds are down just about more than 4% on the year. So we've come a long way in a very short period of time, and a lot of that is really reflected on the currency side. Although, as you rightly point out, things are kind of turning weaker here today. And, you know, I mean, the reality is, you know, it's very challenging to kind of gauge which economies are bouncing back, which ones have, you know, where production's bouncing back, their economies are reopening, there's a revived demand for exports. And then on the negative side, which ones are seeing weaker private demand, where are exports sluggish, and where is the service sector really not out of the woods yet? So, you know, that's really the kind of the tale of two sides, the haves and the have-nots, Paul.
So let's start with Brazil, because I mean it's there we're seeing some tough numbers on the pandemic side. The government really, you know, has not taken an aggressive stance at all. One could argue. Give us a sense of kind of what's going on in that important emerging market.
Yeah, it is an important market. I mean, just yesterday, the Brazilian central bank delivered a 75 bip rate cut. I mean, to 2.25%. I mean, Paul, that's where the Fed was in September of last year. Okay, and by the way, they left the door open to continued easing going forward. But all that notwithstanding, political risk remains really, really high. I think Globo just reported this morning that Fabrício Cortez, who is basically a former aide of Jair Bolsonaro's son, was arrested just today. Both are being investigated for corruption in the state of Rio de Janeiro. So, you know, this political risk, which has kind of been put to the back burner amid all that's been going on, due to the pandemic, might very well bubble to the surface. And we're certainly seeing that here this morning. I mean, the real is off over 7% over the last week. It's down another 2.25% today. So it had broken briefly below 5 and is now back up to 5.35.
Damian Sassower with us, and we will continue, of course, with Bloomberg Intelligence as we consider emerging markets. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, always brought to you by Cohn Resnick. Advisory Assurance Tax. Are you applying for PPP loan forgiveness? Don't leave money on the table or fail an SBA review. Visit CohnResnick.com/loan forgiveness. And we thank Cohn Resnick for their support. Damian, I've been dying to talk to you. You've held back. Your agent talked to my people, and they just said, I got to wait. He had to wait to hear from Kenneth Rogoff, the esteemed Kenneth Rogoff, with us the other day, and he was completely fired up on the Sassower world, saying EM is hugely vulnerable to recovery and shock because they don't have the fiscal tools that the developed rich worlds have. How fragile are their fiscal economies right now? What do you see in your markets?
I couldn't agree with Mr. Rogoff more, Tom. I mean, let's just take India, for example. I mean, Asia's third largest economy is heading for its first contraction in more than 40 years. Okay, and by the way, Fitch just cut them to the lowest rate, to BBB-, which is the lowest investment grade rating. This after Moody's downgraded them. I mean, more downgrades coming. These central banks have nothing at their disposal except to slash interest rates further. And what that does is it removes all the carry potential that, offshore creditors like myself go to these markets for. So if you're not getting a yield or a return on investment for moving your money into these economies, you're not going to do it, Tom. And, we talked about this ad nauseum. And now, I mean, if you just look at the Bloomberg Barclays Global Ag, the average yield to worst, under 1%. Yeah. I mean, that's just crazy. Yeah.
And for those of you listening worldwide, when the hot shot says ag, that's for... Okay, just so you know, Damian Sassower, we were weaned on esteemed bankers traveling the world like William Rhodes to put out international bank fires, and then we were weaned on Reagan and not Ronald Reagan, folks, Donald Reagan, and bills and financial instruments and that. What's the new solution given EM crisis? How do you perceive this gets fixed given modern finance and particularly modern securitization?
Well, I'm a big fan of Bill Rhodes also, and, I was at Citigroup for a period when he was there at the end of his career, but the fact of the matter remains this, and Paul and I have talked about this. I don't know if you were on that particular episode, but we talked about transparency and control and how important that is for creditors looking to lend into some of these markets, right? I mean, talk to me about transparency. What does the debt stack look like for these countries? How much debt do they owe China and Russia and people that are off the books? We need to know that before we're willing, or the IMF or multilaterals are willing to lend them more, right? And then it comes down to control. The efficacy of the transmission mechanism. How do these dollars find those areas of the economy that need it most? And there's really no plan that the IMF or the World Bank have set forth other than shipping money to these countries and letting their local governments and their local institutions distribute it at their own willingness. And I don't think that's the right path. That hasn't worked out historically, quite frankly, Tom. And so my concern is that, this money goes into the black hole, and, people don't forget that money still needs to be paid back at some point, right? So does the IMF and the World Bank really believe sensibly that some of these dollars are going to find their way back? I just don't see it. It's very, very challenging right now, and I don't think without having transparency and control, any sort of real Brady plan type structure is going to work in this environment.
I'm just in shock. I'm sorry. That was radio silence, folks. That's because I'm in shock over Damien Sassar.
I think we should bring Bill Rhodes back, Tom. You mentioned Bill Rhodes.
Could you see a co-interview? We could have the esteemed Bill Rhodes and Damien Sassar together. That would be 2 minutes of entertainment. Damien Sassar, thank you so much. Greatly. We really value his perspective, particularly there on India. Right now with our news in Washington, here's Amy Morris.
Thank you, Tom. Rising coronavirus infections stoking concerns in several states across the country. For example, in Florida, daily infections are at their highest level ever, more than 14,000 new cases in the past week. Governor Ron DeSantis says that's because they're testing more people, but Dr. Eileen Marty at Florida International University says that's actually not the reason.
The bottom line is we're seeing more hospitalizations, and that's not from increased testing. That's from real people who are needing hospital care. That means true increase in cases.
Meanwhile, hospitalizations are rising in Arizona and Texas, and Oregon is joining the list of hotspots. Democratic rival Joe Biden is calling on President Trump to, quote, wake up, and accuses him of waving a white flag and retreating from the fight against the coronavirus. This, as Vice President Mike Pence claims in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, that there is no second wave of the virus. It is being described as a devastating portrayal of President Trump's conduct of foreign policy. A new book by his former national security advisor John Bolton claims the president asked Chinese leader Xi Jinping to help him win re-election by buying more U.S. farm products. Bolton tells ABC News Russia's Vladimir Putin believes he can play President Trump, quote, like a fiddle.
When you're dealing with somebody like Putin, who has made his life understanding Russia's strategic position in the world, against Donald Trump, who doesn't enjoy reading about these issues or learning about them, it's a very difficult position for America to be in.
The Trump campaign calls the allegations absurd. The White House is suing to stop the book's release. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that update. Looking at the futures market here, about 17 minutes before the cash open, S&P off about 0.7%. That's 22 points, puts it at 30.84. The Dow off 237 points. That's 0.9%. The Dow sitting at 25,785 right here. NASDAQ doing a little bit better, down just under 0.3%, 27 points to 99.56. Treasuries, a 10-year Treasury up 12.30 seconds, pushing that yield down to 0.69%. The 2 years at 0.189% on the 2 year. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
The Mini Electric was raring to go. Until, ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now, it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are falling along with European shares as investors weigh the latest reports about fresh outbreaks of the coronavirus in China and the U.S. S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 contracts holding their declines after weekly jobless claims stayed above 1 million. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 21 points. Dow futures down 222. NASDAQ futures down 23. The DAX in Germany's down 1.1%. 10-year Treasury up 11/30 seconds. Yield 0.70%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.2% or 7 cents at $37.89 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $5 at $17.31 an ounce. The euro 1.1226 against the dollar. British pound 1.2437 and the yen 106.83. country. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, thank you for being with us across this nation. What we know for certain is the pandemic has changed. And of course, all the news of the Sun Belt, including Oklahoma, where the president will travel to. And part of this is the confusing epidemiology. He is the epidemiologist from the Johns Hopkins University here, Jason Farley.
It's our first drug approved directly that improves morbidity and mortality. So it's a great first step. So basically what the UK found through Oxford University is that the drug reduced mortality in patients who were severely ill and on a ventilator by 35%. And it reduced for those just on oxygen, supplemental oxygen, by 20%. So that's really important finding. It's not enough, but it is our first really important drug.
Jason, what does it tell us about this group of drugs that could work? We were also told that you should not take ibuprofen but take paracetamol. Does it question everything that we've been told so far on some of these anti-inflammatory drugs?
Yeah, I think what's happening in patients who are severely ill and mechanically ventilated and needing oxygen is that they have an overreaction of their immune response. And so basically we're concerned about what we call a cytokine storm, meaning the immune response has gone so haywire that it's resulted in the lungs filling with fluid. And so what the dexamethasone does in this case is it quiets that immune response and helps the lungs to begin to heal. And so that's really critical because if we can turn it down the immune response just enough, it prevents the overreaction and allows a normal and appropriate reaction to occur.
Jason, is there anything else that we should be watching out for? I mean, this research and this drug almost came out of the blue. Is there anything else that you're hopeful will help treat patients better?
Well, I think there are multiple compounds under review across the world. So this is our first. It's also important to know about this drug that it did not provide any benefit at all if you weren't sick enough to need oxygen. So for those patients with mild symptoms or more moderate symptoms who don't yet need oxygen, no benefit was seen. So clearly, there's no need for everyone in the general public to run out and buy this drug because it actually doesn't necessarily provide benefit. It's important to note that your symptoms need to be severe enough in order for the drug to actually provide a mortality benefit. So that's important. The second thing is, obviously, we're getting more and more data on remdesivir. We're getting also more and more data on drugs that do not work, like hydrochloroquine and azithromycin. So I think as the weeks and months go on, we're going to continue to be surprised by what drugs may be working, like dexamethasone. It is a surprise and a good surprise. And then finding more data on things that are not overly effective.
Jason, what do you make of the number of cases of people infected and also deaths increasing in the U.S.? Do we know the underlying, causes of this? Is it simply a reopening of the economy and people not being careful, or how can we track it?
Yeah, well, when we look at the states, about anywhere from 12 to 15 states that are continuing to see increases in cases day over day, and you're right that goes in parallel with a lot of removal of the non-pharmaceutical interventions, such as physical distancing and others. So I think it's really crucial that we remain vigilant in those circumstances. And yes, we expect 10 to 14 days, for example, after our mass gatherings related to the protests of police brutality. We expect there to be an upcoming increase in cases potentially. So, our team at Hopkins and others have been messaging the importance to people gathering in any way that it's important to follow their symptoms, to get tested, to get evaluated. For people who are going back into their normal routines, they must be vigilant of monitoring their symptoms. And yet we also must remember that approximately 40% of cases of coronavirus are completely asymptomatic. So they can transmit the virus and yet will have no symptoms. And so that's really critical, and we continue the need for physical distancing. We continue the need for limitations on our actions. And right now, the most important thing we can do is be kind to one another by staying away as much as possible from one another.
Dr. Jason Farley with the medical advice of the Johns Hopkins University. We thank him today. Our medical advice is Paul and I will have to be medicated because it will be the Apple developers conference with our guest lineup coming up here, Paul. This is the only window we have to talk about the Apple Developers Conference. What is it, Paul?
You know, all these app developers who really rely on the ecosystem and feed the ecosystem of the Apple iStore, bring us all the great apps that we all have on our phones and our iPads and things like that. They get together and, present ideas, exchange ideas, come out with the latest and greatest. So it's really important for Apple because you think about it, Tom, this is a company that's trying to diversify away and focus a little bit more on their services businesses, which are driven in large part by some of the great apps that are created by the folks out there. So it's really important for Apple to foster innovation and to support these people.
Am I right that the pandemic has even given Apple, I mean, you talk about difficulty moving the needle. They're so big. Yeah. But can I say the pandemic has moved the needle on their services business? I think I can I?
I think you can, Tom. I think, it's been a growing part of their business. People now in the pandemic, obviously, spending more time at home, more times with their devices, downloading, a lot of different apps here. So the services business, which is roughly 20% of the revenue at Apple, a lot of investors are really banking on that becoming a much bigger part of the company. So I think it's really critical here that they continue to show momentum there, which they have. I mean, they've really been really doing a good job.
Look for Bloomberg Technology to look at all the developer aspects of that, and of course some of the key interviews with people out near Cupertino. What we will do in the coming days on Apple is bring in some of the best financial minds we can find to speak of there, and I think I could state this near universal enthusiasm for Apple long term. My radar's up, Paul. I mean, everybody's on board that story, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just extraordinary here. And but of course, there's that next wave, the 5G phone. Tom, I know you're getting ready to run out.
I don't get it. I'm so glad you brought it up. Folks, can I just state worldwide and coast to coast, I still don't get 5G. I guess someday Paul will explain it to me correctly. What I do get, futures, a little red on the screen and negatives. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. and I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SEI. Since its founding 50 years ago, SEI has provided investment managers and asset owners with robust infrastructure platforms and flexible outsourcing solutions. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. The S&P 500 lower at the open, down about 0.6% or 17 points at 3095. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.8% or 212 points at 25,913. And the Nasdaq down 0.2% or 17 points at 98.93. 10-year Treasury up 12/30 seconds, yield 0.69%, yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.6% or 25 cents at 37.71 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.2% or $3.30 at 17.3220 an ounce. The euro 1.1225 against the dollar, the yen 106.75. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that, Karen. It's been really sport, folks. And what, Paul, I say this with great respect for the people that have sacrificed so much in this terrible pandemic. I put out that tweet the other day late at night, and I just did the math, and I just said 2 Vietnams. That's what we are in death here, over 117,000. That's the American count. I'm using the Axios source there, folks, and the Vietnam death source is the great work done by Wikipedia of that agony. And Paul, you look at the sacrifice, and the thing that we've missed is we're halfway through the year. And, you sort of wonder in this odd 2020 where the time has gone and in any way how we reset. I mean, Paul, you're sitting there with 42 guys under you, and you're going, okay, you have to write your mid-year review on the equity markets. Paul Sweeney, where do you begin?
Where do you begin, Tom? I mean, it's just, obviously extraordinary times. This is something that the market hasn't had to deal with really, arguably, for 100 years or more. And the unknown factor, Tom, even today, we're 3-4 months into this, but even today, the unknown factor about the virus itself is really kind of an issue for people as we make our way towards treatments and ultimately a vaccine, hopefully, that will, quote unquote, get us back to normal. But I think if you're a market participant, you're just trying to look to the other side of this.
And what's so interesting, Paul, is the idea of the elasticity or responsiveness of corporations to adapt. Now, we talked to the legend Robert Crandall of American Aviation today, and, he really emphasized the gloom of the industry, his aviation industry. But he also said at the same time they will adapt and adjust. What other adapting is there, Paul, besides whether the nuance, if you cut costs in July or you cut costs in September or you cut costs in February of next year? It's all the same, isn't it?
It's all the same. You have to do it. And a lot of these companies they have more variable costs and they can cut more and probably adapt a little bit better than some of these high fixed cost industries. So if you're the airline industry, you just cut people. And I know Delta said they cut their expenses now to 50% of normal. So they're just trying to get their revenue back to 50% of normal to break even, and the Delta CEO is saying that might be next spring. So
yeah, we will see. Right now, Bloomberg surveillance worldwide with the markets open, and we're looking at those lower prices this morning. But right now, I thought we'd adapt and adjust and go the other way as we talk about the way you bet, not so much in commodities and CTAs and the idea of long trend commodities, but the brutal reality that in foreign exchange, there are two sides of the equation. There are those that speculate and enjoy losing money on a consistent basis, like Vincent Signorella of Bloomberg Squawk. But then there's the other side, which is business worldwide hedging their international transactions and using the foreign exchange market to hedge the dangers of locking in and losing money and gaining money out 3 months, 6 months, a year or so. Vince, is your world any different because of the dampening of demand? I mean, does the speculation of foreign exchange change because the traditional hedging mechanism has changed?
Question, Tom. It has been changing for a long time. There was a time when we really were a trade mechanism where FX really relied on trade figures and such as to where movements went. It is morphed into where asset flows go, so portfolio managers. So you're still seeing big volumes, big trades go through as people hedge for financials. But you definitely are seeing a reduction in trade. As trade drops, so will the need to hedge it, for sure, absolutely.
What are the flows that you see now? I think of the great Robert Sinch, who had a shingle out at a few firms over the years. Folks, he went back, and I don't know if you remember this, folks, but in the NHL season last, there was a guy they picked up to be a goalie in one game. I think that was Sinch from his days at Hamilton. But Vince, I think of Bob Sinch analyzing this, or, David Goodman years ago at Bank of America. Vince, what do you see in flows right now?
I think the key flows we're seeing are basically the haven type thing, where you see emerging markets versus like the more traditional sort of U.S. dollar flows, and separately the flows between the euro and sterling as Brexit conversation happens. So every time we see something that shows perhaps there is trade tension with China or geopolitical risk or some sort of a spike in the virus, the major sell-off goes into emerging markets, and you see flows coming into the dollar. And overnight, pretty much that's what we're seeing. But quick note, the 1220 level in the Bloomberg Dollar Index has been a pretty steady resistance level, and we're getting pretty close to it. And we've held a 200-day in that level. So I could easily see the dollar trade off a little bit today, and we get a little bit of flows into emerging markets and a little better feel for the equity market later on in the day.
Yeah, it's interesting, Vince. I'm looking at the DXY index here, 97 and change, up just slightly today. But, off of that 100, high 99 level, it just held forever here. What is the call on the dollar here? Are people willing to take a little bit more risk and come out of the dollar?
That's an excellent question. It's a really tricky level right now. The dollar, when you look at the Bloomberg Dollar Index and the S&P cash, they've had a very good inverse correlation. So as stocks have come up, the dollar's been beaten, and it makes relative sense when you think haven flows moving out of the dollar, moving into more risky assets, emerging markets, and then moving into stocks. Now we're getting to some pretty lofty levels and a little anxiety. Some over Bolton's book. Some over Trump yesterday signing the Uyghurs, the bill on China. So you really have to look at risk in that perspective now. Do you feel like the market is going to continue to trade higher? And if you do, the dollar will come off, and vice versa.
If you're just joining us, Bloomberg Surveillance, Vincent Signorella with us, of course, working with Bloomberg and Bloomberg Squawk, really helping market people find the bid and find the ask. There's a little bit of jargon in there, folks. I want to discern this. Paul Sweeney, this is how Paul is. He's like a girl magnet down on the beach, Vince, the way he picks up girls, talking about the DXY index. The DXY index is the U.S. dollar index, folks, and it's traditional and goes back to when Paul was a Ute and cutting shit chiseled on the beach. And it's like major trading partners, and it's 54 or 57%. The euro. Vince is speaking a different language. Signorella is young and hip and is talking BBDXY, which is the Bloomberg dollar index, which is sort of kind of like the same, but it's not. The BBDXY is way more sophisticated, way more uptown than the boring index Paul Sweeney's doing as well.
That's right.
And it's very much emerging market. What does BBDXY support, Vince, say about the dollar versus EM?
Well, pretty much it has a lot more EM currencies in it. So it is very, very much more, I think, indicative of where the dollar on a global basis would trade. So if I were looking simply to trade an index to hedge my portfolio, the BBDXY is probably more the Bloomberg index rather than the ICE dollar index one.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you correctly said, Tom, it's more a euro index than a dollar index.
You know, we got to let him go. I mean, Paul, this has happened now 2 out of the last 4 days with Signorella. He brings a Grand Banks 48 into shore, and then while he's talking to us, they lift the anchor up, and he drifts out.
Yep.
You know, off of the New Jersey. Why does he do that?
Well, he just comes in just to, talk to us for a couple minutes, and then it's back out.
Then it's time to go out.
Drop
Vince
that fish
Signorella,
into the water.
Thank you so much for helping us today. Vince Signorella on Foreign Exchange here. Paul, we make jokes about it, but, this is a true story, folks. There's a guy named Michael Rosenberg who's, like, world famous. I have his hardcover book from, like, 30 years ago. It's worth more than the Holy Bible out on eBay. and Paul, Michael Rosenberg put together with our team at Bloomberg an 11-factor financial conditions index, and it was so good that 2 weeks after they released it, the IMF picked it up to be used. And that's sort of the way this BBDXY is. It's just jargon and it's noise to our radio listeners worldwide. But the answer is this index came out. Is it like the Dow Jones Industrial Index? No. S&P 500? No. But it's really been picked up quickly, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a multi-factor index that really captures a broader swath of information. So that's one of the reasons we pay attention to it, and so do the pros.
It's got the EM in it, folks, and critically, it's got China in it as well. With our news in Washington, here's Amy Morris.
Thank you, Tom. President Trump's former national security advisor says the president is not fit for office, in part because he was solely focused on his political fortunes. John Bolton tells ABC News the relationship between President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin puts the U.S. in a difficult position.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think Putin is smart, tough. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh tells Bloomberg Television those allegations are absurd.
Look, I think what folks need to know about John Bolton is that he is now a disgruntled former employee, and in order to get this book deal that he's touting, he had to agree to include classified information that he had access to when he was working in the administration.
The White House is suing to stop the book's release. The Federal Reserve beating the drum for more stimulus to stem from the fallout from coronavirus. Chairman Jerome Powell wants Congress to extend relief measures, says the Fed will continue to do its part.
We at the Fed need to keep our foot on the gas until we're really sure that we're through this, and that's certainly our intention. I think you may find that there's more for you to do as well.
Congress currently deciding whether to renew expanded unemployment benefits. And the 2020 NFL and college football seasons may have to be canceled this year. The head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says unless players are in bubbles, insulated from the community, and tested nearly every day, it is hard to see how football will be played this fall. Fauci tells CNN that if there is a second wave of the virus, football might not happen at all this year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Amy, thanks so much. And Paul, what's so important with that story, and of course with the respect we all have for Dr. Fauci, I mean, he was trying to shut down the Redskins. They're so bad. I didn't want to say that for Amy Morris, but I will. But Paul, it's serious. If one guy or two guys, or a guy 2 weeks ago who you played, gets the virus, what do you do?
I mean, I don't know how any of these sports are. I don't know how any of these sports are going back, but in the absence of a vaccine. But you think about football with 90 people on a team, just the numbers relative to a basketball team or something like that just makes it that much more difficult here. So we'll have to see. But that's a lot of colleges, a lot of towns, a lot of universities. Boy, how much do they depend upon college football?
Oh yeah, it's a huge finance thing. There's no question about that. But I just wonder, folks, 3 weeks after you play the Denver Broncos and somebody gets sick, what do you do?
Yep.
What we do is a data check. That's a good security. The Dow, negative 130. 25,987, SPX negative 6. The VIX up 0.77 points. 34.24 hike. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Fugitive art dealer Inigo Philbrick, who eluded authorities for months before turning up in the South Pacific island of Vanuatu, faces charges that he defrauded collectors of more than $20 million in a Ponzi-like scheme. Among the artworks contested by investors is a $12.5 million painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat, a Kusama installation sold to the Saudi royal family, a 2010 Christopher Wool, and an untitled 2012 portrait of the artist Pablo Picasso by Rudolf Stingel. From cycling to long-distance running, solitary sports are on a roll during the pandemic. Next up, fishing. FishBrain, an app that connects anglers and provides data on fishing spots, catches, and conditions, saw its user base surge 23% to more than 10 million during the lockdown. In other sports news, the U.S. Open tennis tournament will be played at its usual location in Queens this year, although with no fans or New York City social calendar pomp. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Global News 24.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
An And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks are falling for a second day as investors weigh the latest employment data and reports about fresh outbreaks of the coronavirus in China and the U.S. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg, with the S&P 500 down 0.1%, or about 4 points at 3109. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.4%, or 99 points at 26,020. And the Nasdaq's higher is up 0.1%, or 14 points at 9925. 10-year Treasury up 9/32, yield 0.70%. The yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.1% now. It's jumping around up 4 cents at $38 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.2%, or $3.90 at $17.3170 an ounce. The euro 1.1227 against the dollar. The yen 106.80. Watching shares of Biogen. They are the worst performer in the S&P 500 right now, down more than 5%. It lost a ruling that opens the door to generic competition for its best-selling drug Tecfidera. The only other patent on the blockbuster drug expires in 2 days. Biogen is expected to appeal. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. We're going to segue here. Paul and I are a way to do that. We can do that like an audible. It's like the Chicago Bears playing football, and you can do an audible. We're going to do that with Beata Kerr, with Bernstein with us right now, doing so much of their strategy work. Beata, at Bernstein, there is a name that is legendary, and it is one S. Krawchuk. 1 million years ago, Sally Krawchuk invented security research at Alliance Bernstein with all sorts of other people, Sanford Bernstein and all that. And she has been a leader in what you are doing, as you have been a leader, which is not only investment strategy, but speaking specifically to women. Now, I have it on good advice, Beata, that women live longer. Did you know this? I don't, It's a rumor.
And that's why I think it's important to talk to women specifically about taking control of their wealth. But that's right.
You got to take control of your lives. But I'm looking at a collapsing actuarial assumption, and I want you to address right now to our audience worldwide the urgency, the new urgency that particularly women have to get a hold of wealth creation early, because the actual assumptions going down is the medical quality is going up. Those are two trends that are really difficult.
That's right. We started at Bernstein a conversation with women around this very issue, Tom, as you point out. I'm not the first one to bring it up, but the reality of the lifespan of women is that we do live longer. And then you take that in combination with the likelihood of divorce. And on top of it, more and more women as breadwinners making their financial decisions. Really, 95% of women will be in the driver's seat in terms of financial decision making at some point in their life. So it is critical to be informed of where you stand and where you need to be as early as possible in your life.
So, Beata, given, as Tom, phrased it, the actuarial assumptions coming down, we're in a lower growth environment going forward. Where do you suggest people look for incremental returns here? Is it time to push out on the risk curve and think about, emerging markets, for example, or private equity, or how are you suggesting people look for returns?
Yeah, we're clearly in a long-term, secular, more challenged environment, and we're not going to deny that. Our point of view from the moment is not that we have a V-shaped recovery. We're really thinking about more of a check mark recovery where there is some permanent damage to economic growth. Yet, we feel pretty good about equities at the moment. I think we're really at a coronavirus crossroads, if you will. And the market has created a bridge to 2021 that's focused on a few key planks. And sometimes those planks get shaky, and we see what's going on this morning with claims. And the market could retrench in the short term. But we still view equities as a core holding for long-term investors. And, of course, we want to supplement equities with alternatives as well, as you've pointed out.
What part of that bridge, literally, folks, to carry the analogy further, what are the foundations in the water so you don't bring it down like the bridge over the River Kwai? The basic idea here is there has to be a factor on the income statement that leads to profitability that is that bridge? What is it, a return to revenue growth?
Well, you're right. I think there's a couple of different planks of the bridge. And the first was, frankly, the massive and unprecedented coordination in incredible speed of both fiscal and monetary support. And we all know that that was very different in terms of its timing and magnitude compared to the global financial crisis. But to your point, Tom, you have to get back to earnings, and the market is going to be focused on earnings. And we think effectively the market is already looking forward to 2021, where earnings may very well come back to where they were in 2019, but with the incredibly low rate environment that continues to be created by the Fed, the multiple on the market can go higher and sustain, higher levels from here. And so we do think there is earnings restoration from the assumptions that have come down much lower for this calendar year going forward.
So, Beata, what's your take on the valuation of the market right now? We've had, obviously just a big contraction in earnings. The second quarter numbers are going to be even worse than Q1. Yet we've had this market bounce pretty solidly off the bottom here. What's your valuation risk concern level right now?
Yeah, we don't think the market is cheap, certainly in the U.S., and that's why we are global investors. It's been a long time since international markets have beaten U.S. markets, and we do see some advantages in the short term to non-U.S. markets in the developed space in particular. Europe has actually been responding better in many ways to COVID-19 and has had a very coordinated response, and there is potential for more of their cyclical companies to recover earlier even than what we're seeing in the U.S. But the big picture on multiples is with rates as low as they are, in the past, the market has been able to sustain multiples in the 20 times-ish range, and today we're at about 22 times. So it's a bit rich, but there is valuation support with incredibly low rates.
Beata, thank you so much. Beata Kerr with us with Bernstein AB. We're thrilled that she could be with us this morning. Paul, look at this, Paul. I mean, there's red on the screen.
Yep.
Fine. And the NASDAQ 100 is up fractionally. Will it ever go down?
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, you talk about some of these tech names, Tom, and it just seems to be that's where everybody is crowding into here in a world of uncertainty, certainly top-line uncertainty. Those are the names that probably give people the most comfort.
Yeah.
And that's where you are.
Scary.
That's where you are.
Negative 146, 25,969 SPX. Just fractional, negative 8, 3105. SPX doing better than the Dow today on a percentage basis. The VIX, 33.99. I didn't quote anything else today. It was that boring of a day. Brent crude, $41 a barrel. There you go. We are produced in a private room by Richard Truman. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who seize change to launch.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to an algorithm? Or to someone called Al? Or Derek? Or Sanjay? Or Sue? Or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, you must now wear a face covering at all times, avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Thanks to National Lottery players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering hot meals to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
The harshest downturn for American workers in history.
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Massive show for you today. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to be speaking with Stephen Roach on the US dollar and also on the Bolton book and some of the allegations made about the president in relation to President Xi Jinping of China. We'll also get a market view from Barry Ritholtz a little later on. And we'll be speaking with Fran Kinnery on Vanguard's aspirations to bring private equity to the masses. How fascinating. First, let's get some business stories now with Greg Jarrett.
Well, I've got to tell you, stocks are down for a second day. Investors are weighing on the latest employment data and reports about fresh outbreaks of the coronavirus in China and in the USA. Treasuries are extending their advance. Let's take a look at the numbers here as we do every 15 minutes. S&P is down 0.2%, down 7. The Dow's down 0.5%, down 127. And the NASDAQ is a little changed, up 5. The 10-year right now is up 11.30 seconds. The yield 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude's little changed at 37.97 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.5% at 17.2680 an ounce. The dollar yen 106.78. The euro's $1.12.17, and the British pound $1.24.24. Turns out New Yorkers want to see an apartment in person before they spend millions to live in it. The state's pandemic lockdown, which outlawed face-to-face real estate showings, brought purchase agreements in Manhattan and Brooklyn to a near standstill. According to a report by Fraser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman, contracts to buy Manhattan co-ops fell 80% from last year. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Bonnie and Paul.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much for that. We appreciate a tough jobs number at 8:30 Wall Street time this morning, setting the tone for kind of a mixed market, trading off a little bit as Greg was just reporting. To get a sense of where the real action is in the equity markets here, we welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this morning?
Well, as far as today goes, I mean, it's kind of idiosyncratic in a sense that, you know, the sort of overarching themes that we've been talking about for some time really aren't kind of driving the market so much. I mean, you're seeing some gains among commodity producers, and tech stocks are holding up reasonably well. If you go through the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, pretty much an even split at this point between what's up and what's down. And it's not like there's a real pattern among the groups. Real estate stocks are taking a bit of a hit. Healthcare, an area that is suffering somewhat. it had a ruling against Biogen in a patent case involving their biggest seller, the multiple sclerosis treatment, Tecfidera. And Biogen down more than 5%. One of the patents on the drug was found to be invalid. That's a plus for Mylan, which brought the suit and wants to sell a generic version of that drug. Mylan up 3.7% at the moment. Biggest gain, the S&P 500 belongs to the life sciences company Waters, which is planning a management change. Their CEO is going to step down when they find a successor, Christopher O'Connell, who's run the company since 2015. And so you've got Waters shares up about 6% at the moment. So, those kinds of smaller stories on a day where the bigger stories really aren't so dominant here.
I just want to point to a headline coming out of the Supreme Court right now. SCOTUS is stopping President Trump from cancelling President Obama's DACA program. If you remember, the Obama-era DACA program was designed to create a pathway to citizenship for around 11 million people living illegally in the United States. Well, it went all the way to the Supreme Court after President Trump had signed an executive order. And now the Supreme Court has stopped the president from cancelling President Obama's DACA program. So, Dave, back to the markets and talk to us about some of the other idiosyncratic stories coming out of the markets. So Cowen, for example, has initiated a rating on Nikola, which is a fascinating development because it really sort of puts that company and the prospect for electric trucks now into sort of the mainstream if analysts are covering it.
Right, and that's sort of an inevitable process once a company goes public like this. It takes a certain amount of time. They're a little bit, Cowen's a little bit ahead, and they're actually one of the companies that helped take Nikola public, so they have every reason to come out and say buy the stock at this point. And you do have to keep that in mind. You're talking about a company that is a development stage truck maker, really focusing on electric vehicles. And you're still talking about a market value at the moment of $23 billion with today's gain. It just goes to show you, arguably how speculative things are at this point. I mean, given the way that Tesla has performed, I suppose you can understand that. Nikola happens to be Mr. Tesla's first name, but that's a whole nother story for another day. Tesla up 142% this year, over $1,000 a share, up about 2% at the moment. So maybe people are looking at Nikola and seeing, to some extent, the second coming of Tesla.
Exactly. And Dave, I know since, we've been really focusing on during this pandemic on some of the travel and leisure names, they were hit probably first, probably hit the most and have had tremendous volatility since then. Interesting seeing the Delta CEO come out just recently and say he doesn't think they're going to hit break even until next spring, and it might be a few years before they get back to travel levels, flight levels that they've seen pre-pandemic. So it's going to be a long, I think, haul back for a lot of these companies.
It sure is. I mean, the CEO Ed Bastian talked to us at Bloomberg Television. Delta had their annual meeting today. And I'll tell you, after all that, the shares are down 1%. I mean, given the day-to-day swings we've seen in travel stocks in general, I mean, what we're seeing today is pretty much stability for the group. And it's not just the airlines either. You actually have Carnival up 0.3% after reporting a fiscal second quarter loss of $4.4 billion. And Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, their rivals, they're higher. So, a bit of back and forth for a change, but relatively modest moves for a group which, you see 10% plus gains or losses almost on a daily basis, it seems, or at least you have for the last few months.
Have we seen any improvement in energy since we got that little boost to oil prices? I mean, WTI is still around $38 a barrel, not massive, but it's a lot better than it was.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. Energy stocks are kind of pulling away a little bit. Looking at the S&P 500, the energy index there up about 1%. And we're seeing some strength in the refiners, which maybe goes against, what we're seeing with crude because, of course, higher prices for that, raw material mean, higher costs for the refiners. But it's all about, the relationship between crude and oil products like gasoline and heating oil. Of course, gasoline, as we get to the summer driving season, perhaps becomes more important for the group. But You know, we're talking Holly Frontier, Marathon Petroleum, Phillips 66, Valero Energy, all up 3% or more in today's trading. Some of the best performers in the S&P 500 right now.
Yeah.
Dave, do we need to get fiscal stimulus for this market, or is this market feeling pretty good just with the Fed, with the open spigots?
It probably comes down to how do second quarter results look and how are companies sizing up their business to the extent they're willing to kind of go out on that score. That's really kind of a big part of the mix here. You think about a company like Kroger. I mean, they're expecting, after reporting their quarterly results that their fiscal year, they're going to be able to beat the forecast they made in April. But they're not updating the forecast, and you got Kroger shares down 4% in early trading. Right. So clearly the fact that they beat estimates for the latest quarter, helped by all that stocking up of the pantries, not really enough to impress investors here.
Exactly. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for that update again. Kind of a mixed day today. The S&P is essentially unchanged. The Dow's only off about quarter of 1%, and the Nasdaq's up. Go figure. So the tech stocks continue to push this market higher. It's Facebook, it's Microsoft, it's Amazon, it's Apple, all the names that we know and love that have been moving this market for years. Again, still kind of leading the upturn here, and I think it's reflective of the fact that investors in this uncertain time are turning to the names that they feel most confident can deliver solid top-line growth while at the same time preserving their margin. And those are all the FANG plus names that we know and love. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. to Martin Nicaro for world and national headlines. Martin, what do you have for us?
Hello, Paul. Breaking news. The U.S. Supreme Court blocks the Trump administration from canceling the Obama-era Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. It shielded 650,000 immigrants from deportation and allowed them to legally work in the United States. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Radio for more on this developing story. John Bolton's bombshells are the story in Washington today. President Trump's third national security advisor is doing now what House Democrats wanted him to do in December, speak out about the president's conduct. In advance of the publication of his memoir, Bolton tells ABC News what he concluded about the president.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the competence to carry out the job. There really isn't any guiding principle that I was able to discern other than what's good for Donald Trump's reelection.
During his 17 months on the job, Bolton claims the president did many things that could have warranted impeachment, like intervening in investigations of Turkey's Halk Bank and China's ZTE to avoid upsetting their leaders. The administration's going to court to try to block Tuesday's publication. Prepare for a fall without football. That's the word from the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Unless players are encased in a bubble of almost total isolation from the outside world and tested nearly every day, Fauci says he can't see how college and pro football could happen, especially if the coronavirus pandemic worsens by then. She was the last surviving sibling of President John Kennedy. Jean Kennedy Smith, dead at 92. Global news 24 hours a day on air and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Martin DeCaro.
People love a good story. They like it even better when that story is real.
Is this something strange in the numbers?
Paul Sweeney.
That seems like a big miss to me.
Bonnie Quinn.
New funds getting started in order to take advantage of what might be a moment.
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
If Russia does throw this spanner in the works, what does it do to relations going forward?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
How important is that statement there?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community. Support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
With COVID-19, so much is...
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to Emma Mattress.